Hey family, welcome back to my video. Today we will see, what if Naruto was lost at unknown child of Percy Jackson verse? Before we start, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to the original author of this story. Your generosity is greatly appreciated. Now enjoy the video. Happened, he was supposed to win the old hag's bet, take her necklace, and return to the village praised as a hero for bringing back the Gondem Hokage. Well, he wouldn't delude himself, that last part wouldn't happen, but a boy could dream. Of course, he couldn't dream anymore, he was dead, or at least he thought he was. The bastard snake had rushed him before the fight began, forcing his palm into the boy's stomach with a heavy twist. His world exploded in red and then, he felt nothing anymore as he floated in a sea of black. From deep in the darkness he heard a voice, soft and flowing, floating on a non-existent wind out of the blackness. Death befalls the child of wind and waves ripped from the path through life that he paves, blessed by the Lord of the sky was his sire. Deep in his here burned a will fierce as fire born again to the goddess whom shines as the moon but sealed into darkness again just as soon. His return shall be heralded high, bove the din saving the one from the curse of her kin. He cracked his eyes open once more as he felt light on his face. From the abyss came a light, small at first, but no less blinding due to the crippling dark from before. It approached quickly flying on gargantuan wings, a magnificent creature glowing with ethereal energy. Its feathers glittered like gold in the sun, as it wrapped a hulking talon around the young boy's torso. Naruto lost all sense of being as the giant golden eagle carried him off into the gloom, only praying that it went someplace warm, the darkness was so cold. Sawada. A man stood before a small hearth within which sat a roaring orange flame. He wore the pinstriped suit of a businessman, a stark contrast to his long black hair and beard. He looked at the flame in deep comprehension. What was he to do with the boy? His spirit was infallible, and he truly did have the will of fire. He just dreaded the repercussions should his daughter not be happy with her part in the prophecy. My gift shines greatest within the heart of this battered young boy, Hestia had once said. Zeus once more focused upon the flame that seemed to radiate calming warmth. It dances this way and that with barely controlled energy. He took it up in his palm looking at it appraising ly as it seemed to nestle into his palm before bouncing there swirling in a whirlpool of flames. Your father was a loyal follower, Zeus commented, so much so that he received my blessing, and with it rose to great fame exalting my name in the very attack that I gifted him. The Hiraishan, flying thunder god. Zeus sighed as he looks out over the night sky from the window overlooking Olympus itself. He held the flame high. I spoke to Apollo, he said, I received a prophecy, you will live Naruto Namikaze. Sawada. The flame writhed in response to his voice before streaming across the night sky. It flew high over plains and rivers, before darting down into a dense forest. There it flew towards its intended target. As the goddess of the hunt Artemis was enveloped in the flame, hunters cried out in horror. The flame died down leaving Artemis in an older form. She stood tall with a gorgeous figure, the very image of natural beauty. On all sides were young girls of various ages. They stood stock still among the redwoods of the California coast, having never seen their lady in such a mature form. Hunters, she called, rubbing gently at her stomach, it seems my father has blessed me with a child, whilst allowing me to withhold my chastity. The hunters cried out in joy. Artemis being a goddess of childbirth as well as fertility, she would have had a child before could she keep her virginity intact. It was the next statement that drew the ire of the collective hunters, it's a boy. Some cried in outrage while others were confused as to why Zeus would do such a thing. They began to argue amongst themselves, yelling this way and that, hurling insults. Silence, Artemis growled, you are my hunters, not babbling little girls, but strong women. I will raise my son until he becomes a man. Then he must leave, you will all help me. My only duty is not the hunt. In this situation, to abandon my child would go against my very being, even if he is a boy. This is my duty, I will not abandon my child, and so will you stand by me. A chorus of yes rang out through the forest, as one of the hunters walked calmly towards her, a gleaming silver circlet firmly upon her head. She had long silky black hair, and caramel-colored skin, with eyes a deep entrancing black. She stood before Artemis, a questioning look on her face as if awaiting permission to speak. After so many years, Zoe, you of all people have earned the right to speak to me freely. Artemis said with a smile. Are you sure it is wise? She said timidly. No good doth come from any man before. We shall see. Artemis sighed. Maybe under the guidance of my loyal hunters, he can grow to be a good man. Can I count on you for that, Zoe? To help me raise him right before I must give him up, to teach him to live by the hunt and make him into a man that can be counted on. My lady, the girl whispered, tearing up at the trust displayed by her goddess, I wish to know the name of your child. As he is soon to be all of our charge, doth it not ring true that we should know by what to call him? The goddess chuckled as she gently rubbed her stomach, drawing a soft sigh from her hunters. Despite the circumstances, they would be fools to believe that their lady was not happy about having a child of her own. They all began to chatter, yelling out different names, unable to come up with one that felt right. Artemis held her hand up, beckoning silence from the camp as a gentle wind swept through the great red wood forest, carrying with it the scent of the sea. Naruto Namikaze, she stated the name just flowing off her tongue, a child of waves and wind, a child of changing tides, a child of the moon and my precious son. As Artemis was a goddess of childbirth, she had to endure her pregnancy instead of just giving birth through divine means. It was 9 months later, one cold night on October 10th, that a shrill cry broke through the darkness of the very same forest in which he was immaculately conceived. One of her older hunters, whose mother had been a midwife, assisted in the delivery. After 4 hours of labor, you would find Artemis, the goddess of the hunt, holding a small bundle softly to her chest. Baby Naruto suckled gently at his godly mother's breast, something no demigod before him had done, as Artemis appraised her newborn child. His skin a light pink, he was a plump, healthy baby. He had small tufts of golden blonde hair on his newborn head, which Artemis found herself stroking lovingly, enjoying the softness of it. His defining feature were the 6 whisker-like marks that lined his face, 3 on each side. She ran a finger over one, eliciting a light squeal from the child as her released her breast with a soft pop and a cute burp. Artemis wrapped him in fox pelt. The color seemed to fit well with his facial features, as she held him to her chest. They slept there that night on a bed of soft furs, as Artemis dreamt of what the future held. Sawada. Years passed as Naruto grew into a fine young man. He learned well from the hunters, and they learned that not all men were horrid creatures, just the ones they didn't help raise themselves. Naruto excelled in the hunt, never losing his quarry even through heavy rain and crippling darkness. He was taught how to forage, how to skin and preserve the meat from his kills. The hunters were very self-reliant. He was taught how to weave and make his own clothing, as well as how to create a shelter in most any environment. He learned of healing herbs and how to make various medicines from the forest. He was even, reluctantly, taught how to call upon the aid of other gods via offerings and pretty words. He excelled in archery, never missing a target, his shots always precise and deadly, and his bow strong and maintained. It was a gift from his mother, made from the branch of her sacred tree, the cypress. The cypress tree, he was told, had special seeds that only released when the parent tree caught fire. It was meant to be a symbol, as his birth was one of will, a birth by flame. The bow itself was gorgeous. It was a sturdy long bow, engraved upon it were many swirling leaf-like symbols. It stood just short of his height, and he was told it would grow along with him. The drawstring was taut and offered a long draw, his arm resting at his cheek as he fired. He also received a set of throwing knives from Zeus, which Artemis begrudgingly allowed him to keep. The handles were wooden, offering a surprisingly good grip. On the handles were many strange symbols that seemingly held no meaning, but she knew there must have been something to it, still wary of her father's gift to his grandson. The blades were peculiar, being pointed thrice, one long blade up the middle with 2 sharpened prongs off to the side. The blades were made from black steel, with only the blade being celestial bronze. There were large rings at the ends of the handles, and Naruto could often be found spinning one idly on his finger. With practice, Naruto was able to throw them with nearly the same accuracy as his bow. With them came a pouch that they would return to once thrown. She found her son to be very at home in the darkness, often able to come within a few paces of his targets before making the kill. He also leapt through the tree tops with what seemed like practiced ease. When asked, he would reply that he just felt at home in the forest. Artemis would smile. As her child he should, but still, even for a demigod, he was very athletic and nimble. Today was his birthday, his 13th to be exact. The cool October air blew gently through the trees of his birth forest, his home. He stood in that very clearing, the same he had slept soundly in with his mother years before. On all sides were hunters smiling at him as he knelt before his mother in the clearing. He wore a dull blue robe-like top that was loose on his frame. It was lined with a darker blue at its hems. It was held at his waist by a leather belt, attached to which was his quiver, which hung at his back, peeking out from his right hip. On his left hip was his pack, in which he held many dried herbs and some dried meats. Strapped tightly to his right thigh were the strange daggers he got from Zeus. He wore a white scarf around his neck that hung down his back. Under than he had tight-fitting gray shirt. His pants were also loose-fitting and held by the belt. They were a light tan color and were tucked into his mid-shin length dull blue boots. On his hands were a set of fingerless leather gloves, with a bracer on the left to protect from scraping his forearm upon release of his arrow. His hair was long, just nearly reaching his hips in length, and due to his mother's influence, far tamer than that of his father's. He held it in a long ponytail with a few unruly spikes framing his face, and giving him a wild look. His whisker-like birthmarks had lengthened, wrapping around the bottom of his chin, and his eyes were blue with flecks of silver that shone in the night. At his hip, attached to the belt, was a wooden charm in the shape of a crescent moon overplayed with an arrow-like shape. It was from this that he drew his bow, as it got in the way when tracking and traversing the forests. Naruto, Artemis spoke, today is your 13th birthday. Under the care of my hunters and me, you have grown into a fine man, the only one I trust. Therein lies the problem, though. As a man, you cannot be a part of the hunt any longer. I understand, mother, Naruto said solemnly. I know that I have been lucky, as other demigods sometimes never meet their parents. Artemis' heart clenched. She knelt before her son, pulling him into a tight hug. No, I will always love you, my child, but you're a man now. You must chart your own course. Naruto sniffled slightly, trying in vain to hold back his tears. Not so much a man that I don't still cry into my mother's arms, it seems. I fear the day you no longer seek the comfort of my embrace, she stated. You are precious to me, a maelstrom whose winds will range in my heart for eternity. They released each other as soon as Naruto had calmed his breathing. He whipped at his eyes as he and his mother stood to their full height, her being just a head taller than him in her adult form. She smiled down at him, happy with the man he had become, dedicated to the hunt, and a brother to her hunters. She held a hand to the air as a falcon screeched overhead. Into her palm fell a small leather bag. She handed it to Naruto and he secured it to his waist. Inside are some drachma. Do you remember how to send an iris message? Naruto nodded, to which she smiled softly at him again. You cannot join the hunt any longer, but we would always be happy to see you. Naruto nodded as the hunters all moved towards one side of the clearing, headed north. He stood alone before his mother. After another quick embrace, she turned and began to walk away. I love you, mother, Naruto said softly. And I you, she replied. Sawada. It was late March and Naruto found himself traversing the wilderness that surrounded the Pontiac River in Virginia. He had stopped to rest upon the branch of a tree when he noticed movement below him. From the brush came two young people about his age. One was a young boy. He was handsome. Naruto guessed he wasn't a good judge of other males' looks, nor his own. The boy had blonde hair, though not as bright as Naruto's, and had an athletic build. He was wearing some tattered blue jean shorts and a red t-shirt. he was pretty scuffed up. They must have been out here for a while. The second figure was female. She had jet black hair that splayed about her face in a haphazard manner, and striking blue eyes. She was wearing a beat-up army jacket over an equally beat-up black shirt, and a set of blue jeans with the knees cut out. All in all, she was cute, in a dying in the forest sort of way. He watched as they looked around, as if expecting something to pop out and grab them. Then the girl motioned towards the forest. A young girl, who looked about 7, bounded from the forest into the older girl's arms. She had short curly blonde hair, and was by far the cleanest looking, only a scuff here and there on her gray t-shirt and blue jean shorts. The older two set about clearing the area of stones and twigs, then began to build a shelter. Naruto had to stifle his laughter as he could tell neither of them had any survival training. They were building too close to the water's edge, and at an incline of the bank, they would have a hard time staying dry, let alone making a workable shelter. Naruto idly wondered what these kids were up to. Were they lost, on some kind of camping trip? He watched as the youngest head down to the water's edge where she began to fill some canteens. He noticed movement in the water. He summoned his bow, hand fingering an arrow. The young girl finished filling the canteens and turned to go back up the bank. Naruto watched as the shadow in the water sped forward, a long white serpentine body treading the water's surface. He notched an arrow and pulled, readying his shot. The creature burst forth from the water. It was a worm, an Indus worm to be exact, Naruto noted. So this is where those nasty little buggers ended up after the shift of Western civilization. The beast was headed for the girl with a horrible shriek, its rat-like teeth gleaming in the dim light of the setting sun. The girl screamed. Combined with the shriek of the beast, it caught the others' attention as the older girl screamed, "Annabeth!" Thunk. What was once a 10-foot-long worm was now just golden dust. In its place was a silver-feathered arrow, which was stuck in the earth at Annabeth's feet. The other girl rushed forward as she checked Annabeth over for any injuries. The girl was visibly shaken, but otherwise all right. "Luke," the girl said. "What was that thing?" "I have no idea, Talia," the boy, Luke replied, "but I think there is someone out there." A dry laugh echoed through the trees. "Was it the arrow that clued you in?" The three young demigods looked around, searching for the source of the voice, only to find the darkness of the forest as night began to fall in earnest. "Who are you? Where are you?" Luke called into the night, brandishing a beat-up bronze short sword. Talia put herself in front of Annabeth. She seemed very protective of the girl. The little girl Annabeth had a small bronze dagger in her hand with determination shining in her stormy gray eyes. Another laugh. "I'll tell you, if you answer my question." The three were tense for a moment, then Talia spoke up. "What is it? Whose children are you, demigods?" The voice spoke in cheerful reply. The three gasped as Annabeth faltered, slightly dropping her dagger and giving herself a nice-sized cut. She cried out in pain as Talia rushed to find something to wrap it with, when a figure fell to the ground behind them. Naruto stood there, his bow gone, as he held up the spoils of his victory against the worm, a vial of oil from the beast. Very valuable, as it sets everything right which it is poured over, from creaking wood to creaking bones, and the flames it started could only be put out with copious amounts of fresh mud. Sadly, it could not heal cuts, but he had a way around that. Talia fussed with Annabeth as Luke watched the newcomer warily. Naruto had reached into the pack at his hip, retrieving a small wooden cup and some dried thyme. He filled the cup with water and went over to Annabeth's side. He took her hand from Talia, who looked ready to bite his head off. Ignoring her, he set to work. He looked the cut over. It was small but deep. The poor girl must be in pain, yet she wasn't crying. Tough little thing. He placed the thyme in the cup with the water and popped the cork from his vial of oil. "Lord Apollo," he said, "God of medicine and the arts, Lord of the sun itself, I offer the oil of the Indus worm in return for the healing power of this simple herb to be realized." He poured the oil into the water, and after a second it began to simmer slightly before settling down. Naruto nodded to himself. Ignoring the astonished faces, and the pair of gray eyes gleaming in barley-controlled joy. He took the mixture and lifted it above Annabeth's hand. This may sting a little. She winced slightly as the mixture bubbled around her wound, but her eyes filled with curiosity as the skin knit together before her eyes. She clenched her fist experimentally, feeling phantom pains but otherwise fine. She launched forward, hugging Naruto around the neck. Thank you so much. How did you do that? Can you teach me? Is it hard? Not at all. Naruto chuckled. You just have to ask really nicely. Now, could you answer my question?
The little girl nodded. I am Annabeth, daughter of Athena. The other girls scowled, clearly not pleased with how comfortable Annabeth was with the stranger. Talia, daughter of Zeus.
Luke tried to be indifferent. He was a demigod like them, and he put his hand forth for a shake. Luke, son of Hermes. Naruto returned the shake a bit reluctantly. It was the first time he had met another male, and from what his mother told him, he was the only good one she knew. It made him happy, yet at the same time he wondered how that could be true. Naruto Namikaze, son of Artemis. That's a total lie. Talia yelled. Artemis is a virgin goddess. We just met her and her hunters a few months ago.
You met Mother? Naruto questioned. Are they doing all right?
They're fine, Luke growled, except they kept trying to recruit Talia and Annabeth. It's an honor to join the hunt. Naruto laughed, but you don't have to. Yeah, Talia scowled, but some of them were persistent, especially that lieutenant of hers. Zoe is a bit stuck in her ways, Naruto said. It's understandable, she has lived for many years. Yeah, well, I don't want to join their eternal girls club, Talia growled. Fair enough, Naruto said. So where are you all headed? Camp Half-Blood, supplied Annabeth. It's supposed to be safe there. They have barriers to keep the monsters away. Naruto adopted a thoughtful posture. He was sure his mother had mentioned that place before. He must have forgotten. You're saying that they keep all monsters out? Exactly, Luke said. Well, where's the fun in that? Naruto questioned, causing the others to give him funny looks. Why not go? Don't you want to stop running and be safe? Annabeth questioned. Running? Naruto questioned. I never run. I am a hunter. They run from me. Out here, in the forests, all the world surrounding me, the thrill of the hunt, it is only then that I feel truly at home. The others looked at him like he was crazy. You really are her son, Luke muttered. At any rate, Naruto said, I may as well tag along with y'all until you reach it. Can't have you endangering the little one with your lackluster survival skills. Naruto rubbed Annabeth's head, mussing up her hair as the girl tried in vain to push his hand away, giggling all the while. Luke looked over to Talia and nodded slightly. They needed all the help they could get. Talia wasn't all that happy about it until she saw the smile on Annabeth's face. He can't be all bad. Naruto spent the next hour setting up a better camp for them, finding a small den-like indention into a cliff face. It wasn't a rainy season, so they just needed to remain unseen. He covered the entrance with various shrubs and branches. The inside was roomy enough for all of them. Naruto left for a moment and returned with his pack. He pulled out a nice blanket made from wolf pelt and made a bed for
Annabeth, as Talia watched, grateful for how well the boy was treating her. Luke had curled into a corner and was already out cold. Annabeth was falling to sleep wrapped up in the wolf pelt. Talia yawned loudly as she leaned against the hard wall, forcing herself to stay awake. Naruto looked over at her. Her head was drooping every now and again as she tried desperately to cling to consciousness. You can rest, he said from his position near the entrance as he tended to his bow. I can keep watch.
How do I know I can't trust you? Talia questioned. You don't, was Naruto's curt reply. Then I'll stay up, thank you. She scoffed. Naruto sighed and reached into his pack, leaning over towards the girl he called. Hey Talia. What is it, yo? She said, only to be hit in the face with a mixture of ground lavender and sage. She felt calm and drifted off to sleep, falling limply to the side.
Stubborn girl. Naruto laughed. Cute though.
He looked out through the dense artificial brush that made up the door of their shelter, shafts of moonlight catching his eyes as the silver flecks shone in response to his mother's presence in the sky. "Watch over me, mother, I am about to do something stupid again."
He looked back to the sleeping Talia, a daughter of Zeus. Things are sure to be fun with her around. End. Read and review or I will send an Indus worm after you. No, I couldn't. But please do R&R, it would make me ever so happy. Apprentice Hunter. It took some doing, but the second chapter of CCT is finally here. A colossal thanks to my new beta for this story, Sakura for Eva. Without her you would all be swimming in a stagnant pool or grammatical effluence. Well, not really all that bad, but it is infinitely better due to her influence, so props to her. So, here it is.
Chapter 2. Apprentice Hunter. Talia growled as she tore down the dimly lit path outside of Westover Hall.
It was cold out, but her tattered army jacket provided a fair amount of warmth. Still, the icy wind coming in from the sea still stabbed at her skin. They had been running full speed since they realized Percy had run off after the kids they were meant to pick up. Her hot breath was shone white against the night air as she carried on, spear in hand, and her shield, Aegis, glared out at the world.
The blockhead, does he think he can take on the monster all by himself?
Things had gotten progressively worse for Talia since she awoke from the pine. She finds out that one of her friends was now a traitor to the gods and that the little girl she once knew had grown up without her permission. The cherry on top of all that was that she is now subject to a prophecy that could very well mean the end of Olympus, but no pressure. She felt a small pang in her heart at the thought of her old friends and traveling companions. One in particular, a whisker-marked boy who, for all they knew, had died that night 7 years ago. She shook her head violently as they came into the clearing that overlooked the sea. Such thoughts would only cloud her head in the upcoming battle. There, at the far end of the clearing, was Dr. Thorne, and he stood before Percy and the other two half-bloods as a helicopter whirled in the distance. This was good, he wouldn't see them coming. She looked to Annabeth and the girl nodded, donning her cap and disappearing. Talia timed her charge, keeping her movements light and airy, even over the fresh snow, just as he had taught her. She saw her chance as Percy and the other two were barreled over by some unseen force, and spear raised high, she charged forward, just a scant 5 yards away from the enemy.
"For Zeus!" she yelled as she jabbed at the man's head.
Dr. Thorne batted the blade aside, his hand morphing into an orange-furred paw, razor-sharp claws gleaming. The beast tried to deliver a slash to her chest, only to catch sparks against the sturdy form of Aegis. Talia flew back over a yard, landing hard on her back before shifting into a backwards roll, her spear trained back on the now bestial form of Dr. Thorne.
He growled as he launched a volley of spikes in her direction, using his spiny scorpion-like tail. They only just caught her shield, but the force was enough to knock her to the snowy ground. Grover came to the rescue, his reed pipes in hand, playing frantically what sounded
like some garbled sea shanty. In response to his music, rope-thick weeds began to creep up Thorne's legs, crawling out, formed the thick snow and binding him to the ground. Dr. Thorne growled and began to change. He grew larger and
larger until his form was that of a lion, his face still human-looking. He snarled, his leathery scorpion-like tail whipping about, sending deadly thorns every which way.
"A manticore," Annabeth said, now visible. Her magical New York Yankees cap had come off when she'd plowed into the group. Talia, still slightly dazed, picked herself up from the snow, just in time to see Grover get hit across the ribs with the beast's tail. He flew, landing next to Percy and the others, Percy holding a ordinate which she was sure, judging by the dent, wasn't going to hold up. She began to advance on the monster's unprotected back.
"Yield!" the monster roared out at the 3 downed demigods and satyr.
"Never!" Talia yelled as she charged the monster, intending to run him through.
But then there was a thunderous noise and a blaze of light from behind the beast. The helicopter appeared out of the mist, hovering
just beyond the cliffs. It was a sleek, black, military-style gunship with attachments on the sides that looked like laser-guided rockets. The helicopter had to be manned by mortals, but what was it doing here? How could mortals be working with a monster? The searchlights blinded Talia, and the manticore swatted her away with its tail. Her shield flew off into the snow. Her spear flew in the direction opposite.
No! Percy yelled as he ran out to help her. He parried away a spike just before it would have hit her chest, and raised his shield over them, but they both knew it wouldn't be enough.
Now do you see how hopeless it is? Yield, little heroes. Dr. Thorne cackled over the whirling blades. It was then that a clear, piercing sound filled the frigged night air, the call of a hunting horn blowing in the woods. The manticore froze. For a moment, no one moved. There was only the swirl of snow and wind and the chopping of the helicopter blades. No, Dr. Thorne said. It cannot be.
His sentence died in his throat as a something shot through the night, like a streak of moonlight. A glowing silver arrow sprouted from Dr. Thorne's shoulder.
He staggered away wailing in agony. Curse you! Thorne cried. He unleashed his spikes, dozens of them at once, into the forests where the arrow had come from, but just as fast, silvery arrows shot back in reply. In an expert display of marksmanship, the thorns were intercepted, and sliced clean in two. The manticore pulled the arrow out of his shoulder with a howl of pain. His breathing was heavy. Percy tried to swipe at him with his sword, but he wasn't as injured as he looked. He dodged the attack and slammed his tail into the boy's shield, knocking him aside. Then the archers came from the woods. They were girls, about a dozen of them. The youngest was maybe 10, the oldest, about 14. They wore silvery ski parkas and jeans, and they were all armed with bows. They advanced on the manticore with determined expressions. The hunters! Annabeth cried. Talia staggered to her feet with an exasperated sigh. Oh, wonderful! Sawada! Zoe Nightshade stepped forward, ahead of her fellow hunters, her bow-drawn eyes trained upon their target. Permission to kill, my lady. This is not fair, Dr. Thorne wailed. No direct interference. It's against the ancient laws. Not so, Artemis replied, her eyes gaining a fierce shine, cold and calculating even in her child form. The hunting of all wild beasts is within my sphere, and you, foul creature, are a wild beast.
She looked across the tree line. Her hunters all had their arrows notched and ready. Zoe, permission granted.
The manticore growled with fury. If I cannot have these alive, I shall have them dead. He lunged at Percy and Talia, knowing they were weak and dazed.
No! Annabeth yelled, and she charged at the monster.
Get back, half-blood! Zoe yelled. Get out of the line of fire! Just as Annabeth was going to leap upon the beast, 3 arrows appeared in its side, just below the ribs. These were made of wood, tipped with what one could only assume was celestial bronze, the fletching silvery feathers. Everyone followed the arrow's path to their origin, and what they found left them all slightly wary. There, standing along the same path that Talia and the others had run to the clearing, was a boy. He was tall, around 5'7", and the rest of his features being hidden by a long sky blue cloak, with a silver crescent moon clip at the neckline. He had a wooden longbow that was just short of his own height, an arrow notched and ready.
You need not worry yourself with such a lowly beast, the boy said, but Artemis was the only one who caught his voice. In your name, Mother, to the glory of the hunt.
His arrow flew straight and true, catching Dr. Thorne directly in the throat. He fell apart into golden dust, leaving behind only a large bushel of his deadly spines. Annabeth, who had fallen back with the others when the arrows hit, made to go to the cloaked figure. She was halted, however, by the loud, echoing sound of gunfire. They watched as the boy's cloak flew up. In a flash of silver and a series of clangs, he stood once more, a strange 3-pronged blade in hand. At his feet were smoking holes where the bullets had landed. Percy gaped, as did the others. His speed was unreal, and to deflect those bullets, what was he? It was then that Artemis chose to walk forward. Mortals, she announced, are not allowed to witness my hunt. She thrust her hand in the direction of the helicopter and it shook slightly, before falling apart, the black metal morphing into a large flock of ravens and disappearing into the night sky. The hunters advanced upon the group, but Zoe stopped when she saw Talia. "You," she said with distaste. "Zoe Nightshade." Talia's voice trembled with anger. "Perfect timing. As usual," she sneered. Zoe scanned the rest of the group. 4 half-bloods, a satyr, and one unknown, my lady. "Yes," Artemis agreed. "Some of Chiron's campers, I see." Her eyes fell upon the cloaked figure as a smile played at her lips. "Come forth, hunter, show us all the face of our savior." "My lady," Zoe gasped out. "This man is hardly of any consequence." The way she spat the word, "man," did not go unnoticed by the group, as many of the hunters nodded in agreement. Talia scoffed, mumbling something about reverse sexism. "I am wounded, dear Zoe," the man replied, before he removed his hood. "All those nights you sang me to sleep, and now I am of no consequence. Should I, then, just take my spoils and leave?" At the removal of his hood, many of the hunters gasped in surprise. Zoe herself was at a loss for words, as if she had seen a ghost. Some of the hunters were confused, as they had only recently joined the hunt and thus, knew nothing of this boy. For there stood a young man of about 16, long blonde hair tied back in a ponytail with a few unruly strands here and there. On his face were 3 whisker-like marks which gave him a slightly feral look as he flashed them all a toothy grin. The first to recover was Annabeth, who rushed forward, looking up at the boy with stars in her stormy gray eyes. "Is it really you, Annabeth?" the boy greeted as he rubbed her head, mussing up her hair. "Look at you, you just grew like a weed, didn't you? Who said you could get so old without me, huh?" "Naruto." She laughed, tears trickling down her face. "What happened? We thought you had died." "It's a long story, Anna," he said solemnly. "Right now isn't the time." "Okay." She relented, before she tossed herself at him, hugging him tightly. "I missed you, Naruto. I missed you too. You're my one and only little sister, after all." While all this was happening, the hunters were exchanging whispers as Talia approached the boy. Annabeth moved aside and the two just stared at one another. "Whiskers," Talia whispered. "Talia," he greeted, his tone appraising. "You have also grown. You idiot," she yelled suddenly, slapping him half-heartedly in the face. "How could you go and do something so stupid? You nearly died, and that's all you have to say." "I missed you, Talia, very much," he sighed. "But I was in the same position as you, I hear. I only just awoke near the end of last summer." Talia's voice caught in her throat. "Everything's gone wrong. Luke is." "I know all about that," he said. "We will confront him together. He is my friend as well." Naruto was taken aback as she caught him in a fast, powerful hug before releasing, a light blush adorning her lightly freckled face. "That's all you're getting, so don't ask for any more. I wouldn't dream of it." As Percy watched from the sidelines, he wondered who this boy was. He was familiar with Annabeth to the point of calling her his little sister and, even more surprising was that he managed to drag a show of physical affection out of Talia. Not an easy feat, that's for sure. "Who are you?" he finally asked, much to the relief of the more confused hunters.
"I don't feel the need to explain myself to you, boy."
The way he said it was the same way Zoe had addressed Talia, if not a bit lighter. It still served to raise Percy's ire. He was about to speak again, when Grover pulled at his arm, shaking his head. "Naruto," Artemis spoke up. "Why have you not come to me until now?" "I apologize," Naruto said, turning his full attention back to his mother. "Someone decided to return me to my birth forest. It took me months to return to the place of my apparent demise and retrieve my belongings." Artemis seemed to consider this for a moment before nodding, and she stepped up to him, looking him up and down. Then, much to some of the hunters' surprise, she embraced him tightly, her smaller form catching him just above the waist as he leaned over, wrapping his arms lightly around her shoulders. You have grown well, she said with a laugh. Before I could at least reach below your arms.
What can I say, mother? I wasn't going to stop on your account. That struck a chord with the audience and had some of the hunters gasping in surprise, while others smiled softly, having fond memories of the starry-eyed young boy that they had raised from infancy. The only man on this earth they would ever trust again. Lady Artemis, one of the younger girls called. How is it you have a son? I thought you were a virgin goddess.
Many of them nodded in agreement, as did Grover. He had never met Naruto, having only heard about him from the others. They all skirted around the issue of his death, and only ever spoke about him in passing. He was astonished at this revelation. Was the purity of his dear Lady Artemis going to be in question? His little goat heart was breaking under the weight of his anxiety. He was gifted to me by my father, she spoke, leaving the embrace. An immaculate conception. I have never been with a man. My vow is still held. The hunters sighed in relief, and though some were still wary of him, the others assured them that he was a good man. The only good man, much to the ire of the only other two males in the clearing. Whoa, Bianca D'Angelo said. Hold up. Time out. Everybody looked at her. She pointed her finger at all of them in turn, like she was trying to connect the dots. Who are you people? Artemis's expression softened. It might be a better question, my dear girl, to ask who are you? Who are your parents? Bianca glanced nervously at her brother, who was still staring in awe at Artemis. Our parents are dead, she explained slowly. We're orphans. There's a bank trust that pays for our school, but...
She faltered. She could tell from the surrounding faces that no one believed her. What, she demanded. I'm telling the truth.
You are a half-blood, Zoe Nightshade said. Her accent was hard to place. It sounded old-fashioned, like she was reading from a really old book. One of thy parents was mortal. The other was an Olympian.
An Olympian? Athlete? No, Zoe corrected. One of the gods. Cool, said Nico.
No. Bianca's voice quavered. This is not cool. Nico danced around like he needed to use the restroom. Does Zeus really have lightning bolts that does 600 damage? Does he get extra movement points for? Nico. Shut up. Bianca put her hands to her face. This is not your stupid mythomagic game, okay? There are no gods. The half-bloods in the audience looked on in sympathy at her outburst, and even Artemis seemed to feel for the girl. Bianca. I know it's hard to believe. But the gods are still around. Trust me. They're immortal, Talia stated. And whenever they have kids with regular humans, kids like us, well, our lives are dangerous. Dangerous. She repeated quietly. Yes, Percy interjected. You and Nico need training to survive. Dr. Thorne won't be the last monster you meet. You need to come to
camp. Camp? Bianca asked. Camp Half-Blood, Percy clarified. It's where half-bloods learn to survive and stuff. You can join us. Stay there year-round, if you like.
Sweet. Let's go, said Nico. Wait. Bianca shook her head. I don't. There is another option, Zoe offered. No, there isn't. Talia yelled. Talia and Zoe glared at each other, daring the other to make a move. Things hadn't improved since their initial meeting. They were all set for an all-out stare-off when Naruto spoke up. I believe you are forgetting the third option. Artemis regarded her son strangely before it set in and she smirked slightly. And what would that be, Naruto? Simple, he replied as he collapsed his bow into its charm form at his belt. I invoke the right of apprenticeship. This drew an outcry from some of the hunters, but they were quickly silenced by the more experienced ones. Even if I am no longer with you, I am still a senior hunter, Naruto continued. By the laws, I can take an apprentice if I please, to be evaluated and receive mother's blessing at a later date. Talia looked confused, having never heard of this, as did many of the others, especially Bianca herself. As my son, Naruto, has my blessing, he embraces the hunt. His arrows shall fly straight and his feet shall be swift, but he is not apart. of the hunt, since he is indeed a man, she stated calmly. However, as one blessed by myself, he has the right to seek an apprentice if I am impressed by said apprentice, and then they shall also receive my blessing. She would be like any other half-blood only with the same training that my own hunters undergo. Also, although it vexes me, she is free to seek romantic endeavors, as the blessing is based upon skill not choice. At this she looked slightly disgusted, showing that despite being a caring mother to her son, she despised other men with a passion. It has not occurred in years as any who gain my favor normally join the hunt. Miss D'Angelo would make a fine addition to the hunt. I ask why you would deprive her, and myself, of the chance, Naruto. Talia sent Naruto a thankful look. She didn't want to lose the girl to his mother's little club. At least this way, she would be free to do as she pleases, instead of being chained to the hunt. My reasoning is simple, Naruto stated. If Bianca were to take your offer, she would become immortal and bound to your hunt, mother. With all due respect, mother, she has a brother, and to join would be tantamount to abandonment. I see your reasoning, and although it saddens me to lose a potential sister, I know you would teach her well. Zoe, we will rest here for a few hours. Raise the tents. Treat the wounded. Retrieve our guests' belongings from the school. Yes, my lady. Bianca, come with me, we will discuss what your choice will be. What about me? Nico questioned the goddess. Artemis considered the boy. He was still young and very much innocent. For a second, he was overlaid with the image of a young, spiky-haired blonde boy, a squirrel perched on his head, giddy at the thought of a little animal companion. She shook her head. It was best not to dwell in the past. Her son was grown now. Perhaps you can show Grover how to play that card game you enjoy. I'm sure Grover would be happy to entertain you for a while, as a favor to me. Grover just about tripped over himself getting up. You bet. Come on, Nico. Nico and Grover walked off toward the woods, talking about hit points and armor ratings and a bunch of other geeky stuff. Meanwhile, Artemis led a confused-looking Bianca along the cliff. The hunters began unpacking their knapsacks and making camp. Zoe gave Talia one more evil look, then left to oversee things. As soon as she was gone, Talia stamped her foot in frustration. The nerve of that girl. She thinks she's so. Arg. I'm with you, Percy said. I don't trust. Oh, you're with me. Talia turned on him furiously. What were you thinking back there in the gym, Percy? You'd take on Dr. Thorne all by yourself. You knew he was a monster. Calm down, guys, Annabeth said, playing the voice of reason. It all worked out in the end and we'll be back at camp by this time tomorrow. Yes, Naruto said lazily. And look on the bright side, if not for this boy here, I wouldn't have had such a fantastic entrance. Whiskers, you dunce, Talia admonished, trying to hide her smile. Only you could say something so stupid. Percy felt far out of the loop, and decided to give his question another shot. So, could you tell me how you all know each other? Naruto was about to say something. Percy wondered if he was going to be as gruff as before. It would seem he picked up some of his mother's distaste for men. Much to Percy's relief, Annabeth spoke first, effectively cutting the other demigod off. I'm sorry I never told you before, she started. It was a sensitive subject for all of us. Percy noted that her eyes shifted to Talia with the last statement, and he began to wonder if there was something between the two. We met him a few months before Grover found us, Talia explained. In Virginia. On the Pontiac, if I remember correctly, Naruto added. You were all bumbling about, trying to set up a decent camp, and poor little Anna was left to get the drinking water. Naruto punctuated the poor little Anna statement by comically hugging her about the neck. This display of affection didn't sit right with Percy. What really hit home with that gesture was the slight glare Naruto sent his way, as if to say, she's mine and you aren't good enough. If it wasn't for Naruto being there, I might have been eaten that day, Annabeth agreed. Inda's worms. Nasty little things. they drag in anything close to the water's edge and then tear it to pieces. Naruto said this in such a cheery fashion that it felt odd.
So wait, if you met all that long ago, where have you been? Percy asked. They said you had died.
Annabeth averted her gaze and Talia growled, "That's none of your damn business." Percy held his hands up in a placating gesture as one of the hunters came by with their packs. Grover and Nico, having finished their walk, were there as well. Grover went to work at fixing up Percy's arm,
Which, much to Nico's apparent delight, was a sickly green color.
Before Grover began to dress the wound, Naruto produced a small wooden box from his hip pouch. He handed it to Grover, who looked at him questioningly, and Percy winced due to the pain from the gangrenous wound. "It's a healing salve," Naruto explained. "It's made from wild herbs and fights infection as well as promotes quick healing." Grover nodded, hastily applying the salve to Percy's wound and, much to his surprise, it began to lose its green tint before his eyes. He quickly set about bandaging the arm as Percy asked, "What's in that stuff? It doesn't hurt at all." "Just an assortment of various herbs," Naruto replied nonchalantly. Talia and Annabeth nodded, as they had seen him do similar things with herbs and natural oils before. Percy looked skeptical but nodded in acceptance, and Grover just trusted that a son of Artemis would be well versed in all things of the forest. Naruto inwardly sighed. In reality, he had no idea exactly how he came across the knowledge of that particular salve. He had been foraging one day, when he began to seek out particular herbs, with seemingly no meaning. He had flashes of what he could only assume was a far-off memory, as a lavender-eyed girl explained the various uses of these seemingly simple herbs. He assumed it was one of the hunters, and he had only just then remembered that particular lesson. Still, he couldn't place the voice. There wasn't a huntress who stuttered so much. Talia had stalked off, thankful for the change of subject, and she found herself walking among the white wolves that the hunters seemed to have summoned as guard dogs. She was just getting comfortable with the silence when she felt a presence behind her, and she turned to find Naruto standing in the snow with one of the wolves at his side, pining for a treat. Talia idly noted that Percy was having his ear talked off by Nico in the background, before turning her full attention to the blonde. "What did you want?" she asked, sounding harsher than she had meant to. Naruto sighed as he stepped towards her. "Just wanted to let you know that it's not your fault." "Not you too," Talia bit out gruffly. "Everyone told me that, but the fact remains that I should never have rushed in that way." "I agree," Naruto said plainly, shocking her slightly. "It was stupid and irresponsible, but I will never regret coming to your aid that night." Talia bit her lip, her hands tugging at the sleeves of her jacket, as a cold wind whipped between them. "You could have died," she whispered. "But I didn't," Naruto laughed. "Did I, Day-Lily? How many times do I have to tell you not to call me that?" She hissed lowly, her face red from embarrassment. "Your name means the one who blooms, and the day-lily blooms every day, its petals falling at night only to bloom once again the next morning. Your name suggests a constant state of bloom, always growing, always shining." Talia blushed at his words, fighting with her urge to either punch him or hug the idiot. Well, she was, until he added, "Now if only you would live up to your namesake." "You rotten bastard," Talia exclaimed, settling for a tackle. Taken by surprise, Naruto fell to the ground, bringing Talia with him. He felt his breath leave him as they hit the cold earth. When he regained his bearings, he was looking straight into Talia's electric blue eyes, and she was straddling his hips as she pulled him by the collar of his cloak to meet her gaze. Her eyes shining with fury, as her hands actually seemed to give off small, static discharges. "Now that's the Talia I know," he smiled approvingly. "You bloom in your own special way, Day-Lily." Her gaze softened, but her grip stayed strong. The damn knucklehead could be quite the smooth talker. Talia was content to glare half-heartedly at his grinning face, but unfortunately that wasn't in the cards, as a soft cough interrupted them. Looking over, they saw a red-faced Zoe Nightshade, and behind her stood Percy, his mouth agape. Zoe quickly recovered, Schooling her features, she addressed the one on the bottom. Thy mother wished to see thee, along with Percy Jackson. Of course, he replied easily. Would you mind moving, Day Lily? Talia didn't need to be told twice. She was off of him in a second. The familiarity portrayed in the nickname was not lost on the other two, as they both drew their own conclusions. You know where her tent is, correct? Zoe asked Naruto. Yes, Zoe, I remember. Good child, she smiled. I will be with you soon, just lead this one there. As Naruto and Percy headed to his mother's tent, Zoe rounded on Talia, fixing her with a glare. What dost thou think you were doing? What? Talia questioned, not liking her tone. Could you speak English? Zoe gave an exasperated sigh. What was thou doing with Naruto just now?
I don't see why that's any of your business. Talia smirked, trying to get under the girl's skin. Listen well, girl, for I shall only say this once, Zoe growled, you are not worthy of my lady's son. Talia did a double take before glaring at the girl, her fist clenched as her nails dug into her palms. What was that? She seethed. I had something stupid stuck in my ear. You heard me, Zoe replied, now calmer that she had gotten a rise from the other girl. If Naruto is to ever seek companionship, it should be with someone worthy of my lady's blessing. You, Talia growled. You want to set him up with that D'Angelo girl. Better than an impulsive brat. You old hag, Talia snapped. Have you stopped to think how he might feel? Do not speak to me as if thou hast a claim on his feelings, Zoe said in kind. I helped raise the boy from infancy, I only want what's best for him. Talia threw her arms up in exasperation. Whoever said I wanted to be with the idiot in the first place? The lady doth protest too much, methinks, Zoe said with a wry laugh. Speak English. Talia replied with a huff. I believe thy denial would be far more believable if thou did not defend it so readily. Talia sputtered with her words, her face red with fury as she tried desperately to come up with a rebuttal. Sadly, Zoe was gone by the time she thought up a rather eloquent, screw you. Talia stomped her way back toward Percy and the others. She would rather not dwell on why she had no argument for Zoe. She didn't feel that way for the idiot, did she? Sawada. Naruto sat upon the silken floor of his mother's tent, his mind drifting back to nights spent in her warm embrace. She would tell stories of hunts long past, and creatures that would have kept him up at night if not for her calming presence. The fire from the brazier at the center of the tent gave off comforting warmth that he felt he had been missing for far too long. Artemis had been speaking to Percy of what the manticore, Dr. Thorne, had said at the cliff. Percy spoke of someone called the General, as well as some great stirring. Artemis had commented that monsters from long ago were stirring, things she had not hunted in a millennia. Naruto nodded at this, having felt the strange presence in the air since his awakening, as if the planet itself was lamenting the rise of these creatures. It was at this point that Zoe had entered the tent. Looking rather pleased with herself, until the gravity of the conversation set in. Artemis stated that they had come here sensing the manticore, as did Naruto, but that it was not the monster that she was searching for. Percy spoke further of how Thorne said they would soon have the most important monster of them all, the one that shall bring about the downfall of Olympus. Naruto watched as his mother sat stock still. He had never seen her shocked before. She seemed to take everything in stride as if she always expected you to do exactly as you had. Now, though, her eyes seemed unfocused and she was rigid. Naruto feared whatever creature could have such an effect on her. Artemis shook her head. No, he was not. I've been too slow to see the signs. I must hunt this monster. Zoe looked like she was trying very hard not to be afraid, but she nodded. We will leave right away, my lady. No, Zoe. I must do this alone. But, Artemis, this task is too dangerous, even for the hunters. You know where I must start my search. You cannot go there with me. As you wish, my lady. Then let me go, Naruto said, bringing his fist to his chest. If it is so dangerous, you should not go alone, mother. Artemis smiled softly. I would like nothing more than to hunt at my son's side. Alas, this hunt is beyond your skill at this time. Naruto looked dejected and opened his mouth to object, until she placed a stern hand on his shoulder. His speckled blue eyes met her piercing yellow, and he knew there was no more arguing on this matter. I will find this creature, Artemis vowed, and I shall bring it back to Olympus by winter solstice. It will be all the proof I need to convince the Council of the Gods of how much danger we are in. You know what the monster is? Percy asked. Artemis gripped her bow. Let us pray I am wrong. Can goddesses pray? He asked absent-mindedly. The dark mood was lifted at that comment, something Naruto was thankful for, as he hated such moments of intense silence. Artemis asked him to lead the hunters to Camp Half-Blood, much to Zoe's highly vocal displeasure, which she made known as she valiantly protested the notion. In the end, it was decided that they would be going and staying in her cabin at the camp. And now there is one last decision to make. Artemis turned to Bianca. Have you made up your mind, my girl? Bianca hesitated. I'm still thinking about it. Wait, Percy said. Thinking about what? I have been offered the position of apprentice hunter under Naruto. Wah. But you can't. You have to come to Camp Half-Blood so Chiron can train you. It's the only way you can learn to survive. Are you implying that I am incapable of teaching her? Naruto interjected. Percy chose to ignore him in favor of trying to woo Bianca into staying at the camp. Bianca, camp is cool. It's got a Pegasus stable and a sword-fighting arena and, what do you get by becoming his apprentice? Freedom. Naruto stated. What? Percy asked. With me, she is free to see the world, not bound to your camp. What do you mean? Percy asked. The campers are free to leave whenever they want. Then tell me why you have a curfew there, to make sure all the little heroes get a good night's sleep. Percy seemed at a loss for words, so Naruto pressed his advantage. With me, she will learn to stand on her own, and learn not to fear any of the creatures that lurk in the shadows of this world, for they will fear her. Bianca, this is crazy, Percy muttered, switching gears. What about your brother? Naruto can't have two apprentices, can he? Would you rather her join my mother's hunt? Naruto interjected. To become immortal, never to see her brother again, bound by oath to abstain from his company? I don't want to be afraid, Bianca called. I don't want to lose my brother, but everything is happening so fast, I don't know what to do. He has been my responsibility for the longest time, and I know it's selfish, but I just want some freedom, to be my own person. I offer you that, Naruto stated calmly. You can always return to your brother's side, but you hold the privileges of a hunter. Freedom to go anywhere your feet can carry you. And I will teach you what you need to survive in this way. I will teach you what I can of my own learnings, and help you gain my mother's blessing. He speaks the truth, Artemis spoke. My blessing is invaluable for one who seeks the path of the hunter. It extends too many aspects of life in the wilderness. What do you say? Naruto asked. I promise you will not regret it. There is so much beauty in this world that many miss out on. You can see it all, Bianca, and one day even share it with your brother. I accept, Bianca said, much to Percy's vocal displeasure. Is there some sort of special way to do this? Naruto nodded. He reached into his pack and pulled out a small cloth-wrapped bundle, unwrapped it and lay it at his mother's feet. In the wrappings was the spikes left behind by Dr. Thorne. Mother, please accept my offering of Manticore's quills, in exchange for your blessing upon Bianca as an apprentice hunter. Artemis eyed the quills, her eyes a touch appraising, before speaking. Bianca, do you swear to uphold the honor of the hunt set forth by your teacher, and to follow his words without question until such a time as your apprenticeship is deemed complete? I do. Bianca replied. Artemis nodded as she took up the quills. They fell apart to golden dust in her hand, which she blew gently into the brazier at the center of the tent. As it hit the flames, they reached up higher into the air, as if trying to grasp at the small golden specks. A gust of warm air flew into Bianca's face, tousling her long brown hair as the wind whipped about her form. When the breeze died down, Bianca took a deep breath before letting it out, smiling madly. I feel so alive, Naruto supplied.
Yes, Bianca agreed. I feel like I have been trapped in a bubble my whole life and it just popped. The initial blessing of an apprentice hunter is meant to aid in your learning, Artemis said. It gives you a deeper connection with the earth itself, intensifying your senses. I can feel it, Bianca murmured, in a state of wonderment. The life all around me. It's faint, but if I focus I can feel it. Good, Naruto said. You're well on your way. It's this sense that allows us to find the location of monsters at long distances, like my mother and I did with Dr. Thorne. Had I not sensed him tonight, we may not have met until I made it to Camp Half-Blood. The entire time this was going on, Percy had folded in on himself. He felt like a trespasser, and a complete failure. He couldn't believe he came all this way and suffered so much only to lose Bianca to a pretty boy hunter. He admitted to himself that Naruto had a point, and he preferred him over her joining the hunters. His wounded pride, however, insisted that Naruto was wrong, and that the camp was the best place for her. Do not despair, Percy Jackson, Artemis said. You will still get to show the D'Angelos your camp. And if Nico so chooses, he can stay there. Great, he said, trying not to sound surly. How are we supposed to get there? Artemis closed her eyes. Dawn is approaching. Zoe, break camp and get Bianca outfitted with some basic equipment. You must get to Long Island quickly and safely. I shall summon a ride from my brother. Zoe didn't look real happy about this idea, but she nodded and told Bianca to follow her. As she was leaving, Bianca paused in front of Percy. I'm sorry, Percy, but I want this. I really, really do. Then she was gone, and he was left alone with the 12-year-old goddess and her 16-year-old son. So, he started glumly. We're going to get a ride from your brother, huh? Artemis's silver eyes gleamed. Yes, boy. You see, Bianca D'Angelo is not the only one with an annoying brother. It's time for you to meet my irresponsible twin, Apollo. Uncle Apollo can be quite the handful, Naruto chuckled fondly. My advice: earplugs. And I am working under the assumption that you have all read the book, so I may glance over certain aspects of the story as explaining them in the same detail would just leave you reading the book again. I want the focus to be Naruto's journey through the world, and the effect his mere presence has on the destiny of the world. In all actuality, I plan to continue the story past the book. Title blooper reel. Just as Annabeth was going to leap upon the beast, there was a loud cry of dynamic entry. Out of nowhere a green-clad figure flew at Dr. Thorne, legs extended, kicking the beast off the edge of the cliff. In his place stood a tall blonde-haired figure in green spandex with orange leg warmers. Naruto Namikaze has returned. He was giving a thumbs-up sign, as he smiled brightly, teeth shining. How was that? Naruto questioned. The hunters at the tree line all held up boards reading straight 10s, except Zoe, who held up a 9.5. Naruto looked at her incredulously, to whom she replied, Thy feet were separated upon dynamic re-entry. Artemis nodded, holding up a similar sign, as Naruto sighed forlornly, Et tu, mother? End. First change in the tide. Big thanks to Sakura for Eva for beta reading this chapter and getting it to me in such a timely manner. I am so glad that I am still at my friend's so I can get this chapter out. I will leave the AN in there for now just so people know what is going on, but for now enjoy the next installment of Child of the Changing Tides. Chapter 3. First change in the tide, little Naruto. His aunt has the hots for him, it is quite funny. This is why I don't like Uncle Apollo, Naruto growled. Annabeth held Talia back and Percy stood off to the side, obviously not getting the joke. I don't care if he is a god, Talia yelled as the blonde-haired sun god chuckled at his own joke. Now my little half-sister, no need to be so angry, he smiled, nearly blinding those present. I'll even let you drive to camp, daughter of the Lord of the Sky. You'll be a natural. Talia suddenly stiffened before fidgeting slightly and averting her gaze. Oh no, no thanks. Come on, Apollo urged. How old are you? I don't know, Talia replied honestly, hesitating slightly. Naruto sighed. He had the same problem. He had died at age 13. It had been 7 years, so he should be a 20-year-old man. Talia should be 19, yet they both looked much younger. In fact, as far as he could tell, her aging must have slowed as well as his own. He watched as his uncle tapped a finger to his lip in thought before he suddenly smiled. "You're 15, almost 16. How do you know that?" Talia asked, taken aback. "Hey, I'm the god of prophecy. I know stuff. You'll turn 16 in about a week." "That's my birthday, December 22nd, Talia exclaimed. "That means I'm 17, Naruto noted. "That means you're old enough to drive with a learner's permit," Apollo said as he shuffled a less than eager Talia to the bus, the others following on to get seated. Naruto went to his mother's side with Zoe. "I will see you by winter solstice," she told them solemnly. "Zoe, you are in charge of the hunters in my stead. Do well. Do as I would do." Zoe straightened. "Yes, my lady." Artemis nodded to her and she left. It was now only mother and son facing each other. "Naruto, stay safe. There are trying times ahead." "I know, mother." "Keep an eye on the hunters at camp," Artemis added. "They can get carried away sometimes." "You think I will do any better?" He laughed. "They did raise me after all. I would like to think I had a hand in it as well, my son." Artemis smiled. "Do your best. Your awakening at this time is no coincidence. I fear you may find yourself dragged into the thick of this." "It seems I always am," Naruto joked, despite his mother's serious expression, before sobering up. "I promise, I will give it my all." "You always do," she whispered, embracing her son one last time before walking a short ways. She then knelt to the ground as if looking for tracks, her eyes troubled as she rose. So much danger. The beast must be found. The next moment, Artemis was off, sprinting towards the woods and melting into the snow and shadows. Sawada, the first thing Naruto noticed upon entering the bus, and after stowing his pack, was Talia at the driver's seat, clinging to the wheel like a lifeline. Her knuckles were white and her face was stoic, determinedly hiding the fear behind her eyes as he asked, "What's wrong?" "Nothing," she replied, jerking at the sound, inadvertently pulling the steering wheel up and causing the bus to go soaring skyward. Naruto went soaring to the back of the bus. He landed with his back to the rear end of the bus, his head bent at an awkward angle against the floor, thanks to being upside down. He groaned as a few of the hunters in the back seat giggled at his expense. Forcing himself to his feet, he began the trek up the aisle, fighting gravity as he pulled himself forward using the backs of the bus seats. "Slower," he heard Apollo call. "Sorry," was Talia's stammer in reply. "I've got it under control, Talia," Percy called. "Lighten up on the accelerator." "I've got it, Percy," she said, gritting her teeth. But she kept it floored. "Loosen up," he told her. "I'm loose," Talia said. She was so stiff, she looked like she was made out of plywood. "We need to veer south for Long Island," Apollo said. "Hang a left." Talia jerked the wheel and again threw Percy into Grover, who yelped. Naruto held tight to keep his footing as he powered forward up the aisle, nearly reaching the front. "The other left," Apollo suggested. "Ah," he said, sounding slightly strained. "A little lower, sweetheart. Cape Cod is freezing over." Talia tilted the wheel. Her face was chalk white, her forehead beaded with sweat. It was at this point when Naruto reached her, ducking under Apollo as the god flew to the back of the bus. The bus was now careening towards the Atlantic Ocean at 1,000 miles an hour. Someone screamed, and he was pretty sure it was Percy. The New England coastline was off to the right, and it was getting hot in the bus. "Calm down, Daylily," he whispered harshly, gripping her hand over the wheel. "I'm here with you. Anna and I believe in you, so don't be afraid. You can do this. Now, pull up." Talia visibly calmed as she pulled up on the wheel. Her grip was still tight, but she felt more secure, knowing there was someone she trusted at her side. The bus continued to fly across the sky, now much steadier, as Naruto continued to speak encouragingly to Talia. "You're doing great," he told her, Long Island is straight ahead. Ease up the accelerator, that's it. Percy sat astonished while Apollo praised himself on his ability to pick great drivers. Naruto seemed to have a deep connection with a lot of the people he knew, and yet he only learned of him now. On top of that, there seemed to be something between him and Talia that Percy wasn't getting. He decided to abandon that train of thought as ground came into view out the window. The bus was coming in for a flat landing on all four wheels. Perfect. Go Talia, he praised, grinning. As expected of a daughter of Zeus. Apollo laughed. I sure can pick him. Thank you, Naruto, Talia whispered. He smiled back at her. It's no problem. Everyone exited the bus. The hunters led to cabin 8 by a very persistent Grover, while Naruto, Percy, Talia, and Annabeth led the D'Angelos to the big house. The entire camp was covered in a layer of fresh snow, something Percy found interesting due to the wards the camp had set against weather. The cabins were decorated with tiny flickering lights, like Christmas lights, only made of real fire in varying colors. As they made their way to the big house, Naruto took note of the few campers around. There was a burly boy stoking a forge outside the armory, and two sneaky-looking fellows were picking the lock on a shop of some kind. What drew the most attention, however, was the snowball fight going on between a few wood nymphs and some gruff-looking campers. Naruto was pulling for the nymphs. The big house was decorated with strings of red and yellow fireballs that warmed the porch. Naruto removed his cloak, hanging it on a hook near the door as they entered. Inside, flames crackled in the hearth, the air smelled like hot chocolate, and after a glance around, he saw Mr. D and Chiron playing a game of cards in the parlor. The smile that the old man gave them sent Naruto reeling. It was a warm, caring smile, one that seemed so familiar. Unbidden images of a graying old man in red and white robes filtered through his mind. The man's kind smile as he stoked the flames in his fireplace, and told the young boy huddled on the carpet stories of heroes and warriors long gone. Then a picture of the very same man, as rain pelted a black casket adorned in white flowers. The young boy, now older, put on a strong face, desperately holding back his tears. Naruto, huh? He asked, coming back to reality, seeing Annabeth snapping in his face. You spaced out, she said, concern creasing her brow. Are you okay? I'm fine, just a little tired from my journey, he said. Good to hear that, my boy, Chiron said from his seat. I have heard a lot about you from Annabeth and Luke. All of it lies, I assure you, Naruto said with a mischievous grin. The Greek firebomb in the monster donut shop. That was Anna's idea and I had nothing to do with it. Annabeth huffed and reddened slightly as Talia and Chiron laughed. Percy sat back, completely curious about the time when Naruto was with them before, and he couldn't help but feel slightly left out. Now, Chiron said, the two young half-bloods behind you are Nico and Bianca D'Angelo, Percy supplied. Chiron breathed a sigh of relief. You succeeded then. Well, Percy began. What's wrong? Chiron asked. Just then, Grover trotted into the room, grinning like crazy. He had a black eye and red lines on his face that looked like a slap mark. The hunters are all moved in. Chiron frowned. The hunters, I see we have much to talk about. He glanced at Nico. Grover, perhaps you should take our young friend to the den and show him our orientation film. But, oh, right. Yes, sir. Orientation film, Nico asked. Is it G or PG? Cause. Nico, Bianca put in, smiling gently as she kneeled before her brother. It's all right, just go enjoy the movie. Thanks, Bianca, Nico said, hugging her before he hurried out of the room after Grover. I am glad I took you as my apprentice, Bianca, Naruto said. It would kill the boy to lose you. Bianca nodded, smiling, as Chiron spoke. So she has become a hunter's apprentice. Outside of camp, there is hardly a better way to learn, aside from joining your mother's hunt. But Chiron, Percy interjected. Percy, he said calmly, turning to the younger boy. You will learn that there are many different paths to be taken. Bianca has chosen hers and you should respect that. Percy sighed, still feeling a bit like he lost, until Annabeth placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. It's okay, Percy. She'll be perfectly safe with Naruto. After all, he helped keep us all alive when we made our way to camp the first time. Trust him, he knows what he's doing. Percy nodded at her words. Maybe he was taking this all a bit too personally. From there, they informed Chiron of the particulars of their venture. By the end, the centaur was feeling slightly wary. This is troubling news, he started slowly, frown evident. But it is best we leave this in Artemis's capable hands. The hunt is in her nature. If anyone can find this beast, it is her. It was then that Nico burst into the room, eyes aglow and face wearing a manically happy smile as he bounded over to stand in the center of the room. So cool, Nico yelled, holding his hands out to Chiron. You're a centaur. Chiron managed a nervous smile. Yes, Mr. D'Angelo, if you please. Though, I prefer to stay in human form in this wheelchair for, first encounters. And, whoa. He looked at Mr. D. You're the wine dude? No way. Mr. D gave Nico a look of loathing. The wine dude? Dionysus, right? Oh, wow. I've got your figurine. My figurine. In my game, Mythomagic. And a holofoil card, too. And even though you've only got like 500 attack points and everybody thinks you're the lamest god card, I totally think your powers are sweet. Mr. D seemed truly perplexed. Well, that's gratifying. Percy, Chiron said quickly, you and the others go down to the cabins. Inform the campers we'll be playing Capture the Flag tomorrow evening. Capture the flag? He asked. But we don't have enough. It is a tradition, Chiron said. A friendly match whenever the hunters visit. Yeah, Talia muttered. I bet it's real friendly. Chiron jerked his head toward Mr. D, who was still frowning as Nico talked about how many defense points all the gods had in his game. Run along now, Chiron told them. Oh, right, Talia said. Come on. I never got to take part in one of these, Naruto noted. Should be fun. As they exited the big house, they saw that over at the basketball court, a few of the hunters were shooting hoops. One of them was arguing with a guy from the Ares cabin. The Ares kid had his hand on his sword and the hunter girl looked like she was going to exchange her basketball for a bow and arrow at any second. Bianca, Naruto, and I will break that up, Talia said. You two circulate around the cabins. Tell everybody about Capture the Flag tomorrow. All right. You should be team captain, Percy suggested. No, she said. You've been at camp longer. You do it. We can. Co-captain, or something. She looked about as comfortable with that as Percy felt, but she nodded. As she and Naruto headed for the court, Percy said, Hey, Talia. Yeah? I'm sorry about what happened at Westover. I should have waited for you guys. No need to worry about that, Percy, Naruto interjected. Talia probably would have done the same thing. She can be a bit hot-headed sometimes. What's that supposed to mean? Talia asked, annoyed. Don't take it as an insult, he said pleadingly. It just means you have a lot of passion for hurting things. Why you? Talia growled as she chased a chuckling Naruto about in a circle. Just like old times, Annabeth teased with a laugh. Weren't you supposed to be breaking up a fight? Yeah, Talia agreed, skidding to a stop. We'll get right on that. The five split ways as Naruto, his apprentice, and Talia went off to stop a hunter and an Ares camper from killing each other with their sword and basketball. Sawada, Naruto said goodbye to Talia when she went to set herself up in her cabin and get some training in afterward. He figured he may as well get set up as well and start Bianca's training so she would be of use in the game the following night. He led her to the Artemis cabin, which was, by far, the most normal looking, in the day, at least. The outside half of the walls were of polished silver and were decorated with various animal paintings and carvings, the most prominent of which was the stag. Walking through the doors, he smiled at the many hunters chatting and caring for their bows. He felt at home here. The interior walls were the same polished silver, but furs were hung along the walls as well. The cabin was built under the assumption that only the hunters would ever make use of it. In that respect, the bunks, which were made of trees that seemed to grow out of the earthen floor, were all in one room. Off to the left of the main room were the showers, which were, in fact, just one large natural spring with a waterfall jutting from the stone wall. The most high-tech thing were the toilets to the right of the main room. Naruto sighed. This cabin was made before his birth and was never meant to cater to males. It would be rough going for his stay in camp, and most likely a frustrating one if his newly raging hormones had anything to say about it. The hunters all smiled at him, some still a bit put off but willing to accept their lady's only son and his apprentice. Naruto made his way to the end of the room near a window and placed his pack on the top bunk, motioning for Bianca to take the bottom. With that task done, they both head out of the cabin. It was at this point when Bianca asked a very poignant question. "What are we doing?" "We are getting you a bow," Naruto told her matter-of-factually. "But, the armory is over that way," Bianca pointed out, recalling from their walk to the big house. Naruto chuckled. "Your first task as an apprentice hunter is to make your own bow." "But I don't know how to make a bow," she mumbled. "I'll be there to help you, and besides," Naruto said with a laugh, "they practically make themselves." "Sawada, you can't be serious," Bianca deadpanned as she and Naruto stood beneath a yew tree. "Dead serious. Everything has life in it, Bianca," Naruto said. "The sooner you figure that out, the better the hunter you will be." "But it's a tree," she sighed. "Yes," Naruto agreed. "A yew tree, and a fine one at that. Very old and very strong." He pat the trunk, and the leaves rustled lightly, as if responding. "Now get on with it, my skeptic apprentice." "All right," she muttered, before sighing and straightening before the tree. Mr. or Mrs. Yew Tree, could you spare me a branch to make my bow?" Bianca turned away from the tree, fully expecting no response. "You see this as OWW." Naruto chuckled as he watched Bianca pick up the tree branch that had fallen on her head. She looked back and forth from the tree to the branch before smiling brightly. Naruto laughed. She would make a great apprentice. "Okay, what next?" she asked. "Next, we find the necessary materials," Naruto said. "Unlike the hunters or my bows, which are gifted by the gods, you must earn yours as I did my first bow. Mother said she wanted me to learn the hard way, so I did. I still have my first bow safely hidden in my birth forest." "So what are the necessary materials?" Bianca asked. "That is all up to you," Naruto said, shrugging. "Reach out with your senses, feel all the life around you, and when you find one that calls to you, we will begin." Naruto watched as Bianca closed her eyes, taking deep, gentle breaths. She stood perfectly still. About a minute later, her eyes shot open and she darted into the forest, Naruto hot on her heels. As she led him deeper and deeper into the forest, he began to wonder what she could be in search for, as the woods became much thicker and darker. Abruptly, she stopped, crouching just behind a bush with a small clearing beyond it. Naruto fell to a knee next to her and gasped slightly at the sight that greeted them. "What is that thing?" Bianca whispered harshly. There in the clearing was a single tree long dead. The clearing itself was devoid of life. The ground was cracked and charred here and there as if it had been scorched. However, the state of the clearing itself was not the reason for their stopping. It was what was perched atop that gnarled tree. For there, its bronze feathers gleaming, was a bird as tall as Bianca herself. It was quite the intimidating sight, with its metallic talons and beak still tinted red with dried blood. "A Stymphalian bird," Naruto replied quietly. "It's rare to see one in a forest like this. Normally they like wide open plains so their prey cannot hide." "I felt a pull," Bianca stated. "Like something calling me to this place. What am I supposed to do now?" "Now," Naruto said, "you must defeat it." Bianca gaped at him incredulously. "Do you see the size of that thing? There is no way I can take that thing on." "You vowed to follow my instructions without question," Naruto reminded her.
This is your first trial as a hunter. You must conquer this beast as well as your fear. Bianca flinched slightly before taking a deep breath and steeling her resolve. She stood a turn to face the beast. However, before she could move forward, she felt a tug in her arm, and turning, she saw Naruto holding her yew branch. "You'll need this," he stated. She nodded, and upon taking the branch, she found it to be just a half-head's length taller than her. It was lighter than she had imagined, and she could feel a light hum coming from within as if the branch was glad to be held. Bracing herself, she moved into the clearing. As she reached the midway point to the tree, the bird finally noticed her, flapping its wings and landing at the base of the tree, kicking up dust and ash. The beast let out a shrill screech, flapping its right wing. Bianca reacted a bit slowly after catching the glint of the bronze feathers flying at her. She raised her branch in defense, catching a few feathers as they penetrated the wood, nearly piercing through the other side. She had 4 other feathers sticking out of her shoulder, and she grit her teeth as blood poured from the wounds. She held her branch out like a spear, finding the feathers that had halfway emerged from the other side of the staff had given it a deadly edge. She rushed forward, rolling to the left as the bird let loose another volley, and quickly finding her feet, she continued her dash forward. When she was just a scarce 2 yards away, the bird flapped both wings, furiously sending out a gust of wind, and feathers 2 impacted against her left shoulder, sending her sprawling, her staff landing 2 feet out of reach. Naruto watched with bated breath as the beast advanced on the prone form of his student. The bird reared its head back, intent on ending the girl with one strike. Naruto smirked when Bianca rolled backwards, the bird's steely beak getting stuck in the ground. Bianca retrieved her staff mid-roll and, with a ferocious cry, brought it down on the bird's head, the creature's own feathers stabbing deep into its skull. Bianca panted, grin plastered on her face as the monster faded to gold dust on the breeze, leaving behind only a scant few bronze feathers. She stood, wincing, as the bronze feathers in her shoulders made themselves known again. "Good job, Bianca," Naruto praised, giving a laugh. That was crazy," she stuttered. "I never knew I could move like that." "It's in your blood. You have heightened combat awareness," Naruto stated, placing both hands on her shoulders. "You also have the senses of a hunter, so I was sure you would succeed." Bianca smiled at her teacher, looking forward to what she could learn from him until, with a wet squelch, the feathers were ripped from her body. She screamed and jerked away, but Naruto had already discarded the feathers and had a tight hold on her shoulders. "Calm down," Naruto said gently. "They had to come out. It was best to do it while you were distracted. Now, hold still." Bianca calmed as Naruto reached into his hip pouch, retrieving the same salve he had used on Percy the night before. "You'll need to apply this to it," Naruto said as he handed her the salve and turned away. "Let me know when you are done." Bianca nodded, forgetting he couldn't see it anyway, thankful for him respecting her privacy. She removed her shirt and applied the salve to her injuries, silently marveling at the strength of the salve. "You can turn around now," she said, pulling her shirt back down. "Will I ever learn to make things like that?" "Eventually, but first you need to make your bow," Naruto laughed. "Speaking of which," the girl spoke. "What do I do now? I have a stick and some feathers. What more is there?" "Do just the same as before, just once more. We are only missing one component." Bianca nodded, and after a moment of silence, she was off again at a more sedated pace, though still feeling phantom pains from time to time. Bianca had also been mentally preparing for whatever beast her senses may have led them to this time. When they reached the end of their journey, Bianca was pleasantly surprised. It was a sparkling natural spring. It bubbled lightly in the center as its crystal-clear waters flowed into a small stream. The two stepped forward and Naruto watched as Bianca knelt at the water's edge, seemingly mesmerized by her own reflection. She jumped slightly when her image shifted and something burst forth from the water. "Relax," Naruto whispered. "It is a pagaya, a type of naiad that lives in springs." "Indeed I am, young hunter," came a soft voice from atop the water. Most forget that and simply expect me to be a giggling mess like those other naiads. There on the water stood a woman, clothed in blue silken robes that seemed to flow and ripple like water. Her skin was as pale as the moon itself and her eyes a deep sea green. She smiled. "What brings you here?" "I am Naruto," he told her, "and I can only guess that you are the Pagaya known as Kasodus." "You are quite knowledgeable, young Naruto." Kasodus laughed, her voice as soft and smooth as the gurgling of her spring. "I am indeed. My spring itself was once located at the Oracle in Delphi, and though it was named after me, the spring has been dedicated to your uncle, Apollo. As such, it is a sacred place to the sun god. Strangely enough, I myself gained some measure of clairvoyance living in these waters. You have quite the destiny ahead of you, Naruto." "Namikaze. Then you must already know why we are here," Naruto said. "I myself am at a loss. I had expected some manner of beast to appear." The woman on the water scoffed, tossing a lock of ebony hair behind her shoulder as she stepped forward. "I am clearly not a beast," she agreed, "but I have what you seek. Come here, girl." Bianca hesitated, but with a quick nod from her teacher, she stepped forward. Kasodus plucked one of the feathers from her staff and quickly cut a single strand of her hair, placing it lightly in the girl's palm. "May your arrows fly with the fluidity and flexibility of water," she stated, closing the girl's hand over the strand. "You will do well, girl." With that the woman fell apart to water, leaving a very confused Bianca and a slightly gaping Naruto. Kasodus was an old spirit and a powerful one, so judging by what she said, Bianca's bow will be something else indeed. Sawada. Naruto led Bianca from the spring to an open clearing where he proceeded to build a fire. Night was falling quickly and the forest was a dark place. Bianca was thankful for the fire and she sat cross-legged across from Naruto as he gazed at her through the dancing flames. "You did great today, Bianca," he told her, pride evident in his features as he smiled at her. "It is finally time to make your bow." Bianca nodded as she took out the materials. Her shaft of yew, the bronze feathers, and a single strand of hair from the Pagaya. "Kasodus. Bind the feathers to the shaft using the strand of hair," Naruto said. Bianca carefully tied the feathers to the shaft, slightly afraid of breaking the tiny strand. She found that it was stronger than it looked, so she pulled it taut and smiled at her work. "Now you must place it in the fire," Naruto said, "but first you must name your bow." Bianca stood holding the staff before her and she took a deep breath for her concentration. As she stood she felt a chill down her spine, but oddly enough instead of unnerving her it gave her a feeling of warmth. She smiled as she thrust her staff into the fire, calling out its name, Saikinigi. The wood instantly burst into white-hot flames that shone bright against the darkness of the forest. Bianca shielded her eyes from the light as wind seemed to pick up. After a moment like this, everything became silent and all that was heard was the crackling of the fire. Bianca opened her eyes to see Naruto standing before her, a smile on his face. "Shadow Hunt," Naruto smiled. "A fine name for a fine bow." Bianca gazed upon her bow, taking in every detail. It was smaller than Naruto's, only standing up to her waist. The bow itself had a steeper curve to it than Naruto's, and at the middle where she gripped it, two spikes jutted out, one above the other. When held lengthwise it looked like a bird in flight. The wood itself seemed to be charred a deep black, yet was finely polished and smooth. Along the ends of the bow, bronze feathers sprouted, counting 3 on each side, completing the look of a bird of prey. The bow sting was the same deep black and was strung taut and firm, offering a strong pull. "It's beautiful," Bianca murmured, her eyes wide with awe. "Is it really mine?" "You made it yourself," Naruto said. "This is just the first step in your training, though. You will learn much and you will be tested." "I'm ready for it," Bianca said defiantly. "I want to be a hunter." Naruto smiled as the moon grew high in the sky, flecks of gold reflected from pools of deep blue. "Well then," he said. "Mother is watching, so let's not waste time. Next lesson. Finding tonight's dinner." Naruto tossed the girls a quiver of arrows like his own, only the
Leather was tanned black to match her bow. Bianca smiled as she followed her teacher into the surrounding forest, the darkness enveloping them even as the moon lit their way. Sawada, Naruto was not a happy camper. When he and his apprentice had returned to camp at midday after training in the forest, he had been informed of Zoe's dream in regards to his mother. Needless to say, he was livid when Chiron denied their request to leave, and even more so when they were forced to engage in the capture the flag game while his mother needed him. He, like Zoe, found himself sending the horseman heated glares, his eyes voicing his distaste for being here. Talia had asked what was wrong after noticing his discomfort, and she, too, was wondering why Chiron would not allow them to go. Regardless, everyone was getting ready for the game. It was going to be a small one. 13 hunters and about the same number of campers were going to take part. The hunters were silent as they strapped on light armors, sometimes whispering harshly, obviously shaken by the news of their lady. Naruto recognized the boy from the armory that he had seen on his first day was fighting for the campers, as well as some other rather burly-looking guys. Alongside them were the twins who had been breaking into the camp store not long ago, and his apprentice's little brother. He also noted that a number of them were very angry for some reason or another. The angry ones all had perfectly shining white teeth which were grit tightly in rage. Who pissed in their cornflakes? He mumbled. He picked up a long piece of deep blue cloth that signified his allegiance in the upcoming game, not wanting to weigh himself down with armor. As Naruto moved to tie the cloth around his head, he was overcome by pain as he fell to his knees, clutching his head. Naruto, close your eyes. There is something I want to give you. Congratulations on graduating. Let's celebrate. I'll buy you a bowl of ramen. That man's smiling, scarred face floated in and out of his mind. He was important to him. Where had he met this man? He couldn't remember. Iruka-sensei. That was the name. Naruto, he mumbled as he came to, his vision blurry. What happened? You just started screaming, then you passed out, replied the voice that he now recognized as Talia. You had us worried. What happened? Nothing, Naruto said, regaining his bearings and slowly sitting back up. I'm fine, just some sort of freak headache, that's all. You don't look fine, Talia stated, and Bianca nodded her accent. Truth be told, he didn't feel it, either. Being slightly pale and sweating, he looked sick. Just drop it, he urged, sending Talia a pleading look. Fine. She relented but held his gaze long enough to let him know it wasn't over. Bianca had long since tied another deep blue cloth around her head in preparation for the game. As everyone was readying themselves, she and Naruto moved off to the side and he taught her how to check her bow before battle as well as a quick drill over notching speed with her arrows. It wasn't long before Chiron's hoofs thundered on the pavilion floor. Heroes, he called. You know the rules. The creek is the boundary line. Red team, Camp Halfblood shall take the West Woods. Hunters of Artemis, blue team, shall take the East Woods. I will serve as referee and battlefield medic. No intentional maiming, please. All magic items are allowed. To your positions. The hunters, led by Zoe, head into the East Woods and after a short trek, found a clearing to set their flag in. It was small but sloped up near the end and the trees along the edge were particularly tall. The hunters all went to a knee before their lieutenant, Naruto, and Bianca did the same, only separating themselves slightly from the main group. The hunters have never lost a game of capture the flag. It shall not be any different this night, Zoe stated firmly. That said, I know that Our Lady's plight has us all on edge, but thou all must stay strong and honor her with our victory tonight. The hunters cheered and clapped, lifting the somber mood that the day had been bathed in. Now, she began. Our strategy doth be a simple one, as we hold a great advantage over the half-bloods. Yeah, agreed one of the newer hunters, we don't have any stupid boys on our team. Zoe smiled wryly as many voiced their agreement. On the contrary, dear sister, it is thy only brother, our dear Naruto, that shall seal our victory this night. Whispering broke out among the ranks but was silenced as Zoe continued.
Come now, my sisters, those of us that were there for his childhood know very well that no one, save for Our Lady herself, can traverse the forest with such ease as our brother. That child led us on grand chases through the forest, spoke one of the senior hunters, and his feet never once touched the ground. Naruto smiled to himself, remembering his youth among the hunters. The pranks, the jokes, the laughter. Stories by the campfire and so many loving sisters to watch over him. He sighed. How he missed his childhood. Bianca was enthralled in the story, wanting to learn more about her mysterious teacher, but near the end, something struck her. How? She asked Zoe, causing Naruto to look towards her. How can you run without touching the ground? The newer hunters once more found themselves feeling out of the loop. There was just so much about this boy they didn't know. Zoe smiled at their questioning looks as she turned to her little brother. How indeed, she pondered, a sly smile stretching across her face. How dost thou run without touching the ground, Naruto? Naruto smiled at his sister before replying. I call it, tree running. Sawada. Naruto stood high on a tree just above the boundary line. He could see a group of hunters trailing a group of campers to the left. On the right, he watched as Zoe moved to intercept Talia and her group. From his elevated position, he could see Percy and a few other campers at what Zoe called Zeus's fist. She had been right. It was a very defensible position and the odds-on choice for a base. He smirked as Percy rushed forward and leapt over his head, meeting him halfway to the boundary line before advancing on their base. Naruto stopped just short of the clearing in which the peculiar rock formation resided. 4 guards, one being very inexperienced. He smiled to himself. This would be just too easy. He reached into his quiver, pulling out what he somewhat affectionately called fart arrows. Taking aim at the 2 sneaky-looking campers' feet, he let the arrow fly and it exploded into a medium-sized cloud of noxious yellow smoke. The blast alerted the other 2 guards who immediately drew their weapons, one albeit a bit clumsily. Naruto smirked and pulled from his quiver another of the non-lethal arrows he had prepared for this match. Taking quick aim at the larger, more experienced guard, he let 4 arrows fly as they spread to reveal a net which hit the camper and pinned him to the ground. To the boy's credit, he was strong enough to dislodge the arrows, but his flailing only served to tangle him further. He leapt into the clearing, effectively drawing the attention of the final guard, his apprentice's little brother. The boy stood defiantly, despite the fact that he was visibly shaken, his too big armor hanging off his form as he struggled to keep his sword raised. Still, that glint in the boy's eyes showed determination and courage that deserved to be recognized. Naruto collapsed his bow into its charm form as he took one of his tri-tipped blades from his holster. Okay, kid, he said, slipping into a comfortable fighting stance. We have a few seconds, bring it on, blade to blade. The boy's eyes sparkled with joy at the thought of crossing blades with someone, and with a raging battle cry, he charged, his blade held high. He was a pace away from Naruto when he brought the blade down, its length leading it to cut through the older boy's left shoulder. Naruto caught the blade between one of the outer prongs, pressing the flat of the main blade to that of his opponent's, and he forced the weapon from the boy's hand before shoulder checking him to the ground. You'll get better with time, he said to the gasping boy, before leaping up the many stones and grasping the flag. From his vantage point, he could see yellow plume of smoke and a startled cry that sounded a lot like Talia. With a huge leap that even he was surprised he made, he cleared the distance between the rocks and the woods and continued on through the trees. He cleared the boundary line, dropping to the forest floor right in front of a winded Percy who looked flabbergasted. Nico and the larger camper came running from the opposite side as the 2 groups converged on the creek, the hunters cheering loudly. Chiron came galloping in with the 2 sneaky-looking kids on his back, both green in the face. The hunters win, Chiron announced without pleasure. Then he muttered, for the 56th time in a row. Perseus Jackson. Talia yelled, storming toward the aforementioned boy. She smelled like rotten eggs, and she was so mad that blue sparks flickered on her armor. Everybody cringed and backed up because of her shield aegis. What in the name of the gods were you thinking?
she bellowed. I got the flag, Talia. He shook it in her face. I saw a chance and I took it. I was at their base. Talia yelled. But the flag was gone. If you hadn't butted in, we would have won. You had too many on you. Oh, so it's my fault? I didn't say that. Arg. Talia pushed him, and with a crack and a spark, he flew backward 10 feet into the water. Some of the campers gasped. A couple of the hunters stifled laughs. Naruto wished he had a camera. Sorry, Talia said, turning pale. I didn't mean to. A wave erupted from the creek, blasting into Talia's face and dousing her from head to toe. Percy stood up. Yeah, he growled. I didn't mean to, either. Talia was breathing heavily. Enough. Chiron ordered. But Talia held out her spear. You want some, seaweed brain? Bring it on, pinecone face. That's enough, you two, Naruto said, deciding it best to end this. Talia wavered, but Percy held strong, his sword raised. She started it. Yeah, by accident, Naruto deadpanned, and she tried to apologize, but you just had to get your 2 bits in with that last splash and start everything back up. Percy had the decency to look slightly ashamed, as did Talia. I didn't mean to shock you, Talia said. It's just that my abilities are linked to my emotions. I was angry, instant taser. Yeah, Percy said. Sorry for getting you wet. Naruto laughed. See, isn't it better when friends get along? To that, he received a slight nod. Besides, neither of you had a chance to begin with. After all, I was running the flag for the other team. Her response was a shock-ladled headlock from the resident human taser. You idiot! She growled as she held him to her breastplate, inadvertently sending a current through the metal. Calm down, Lily, he cried. That hurts. Don't call me that in public, you idiot. So I can call you it all I like in private then? I never said that? Maybe not, but his retort died in his throat as he noticed that the clearing had grown eerily quiet. Both he and Talia separated to focus on what had captured everyone's attention. Something was approaching. It was shrouded in a murky green mist, but as it got closer, the campers and hunters gasped. This is impossible, Chiron said. He sounded extremely nervous. She has never left the attic, never. And yet, the withered mummy that held the oracle shuffled forward until she stood in the center of the group. Mist curled all around the clearing, turning the snow a sickly shade of green. None of them dared move. Then her voice hissed inside their heads. Several clutched their hands over the ears. I am the spirit of Delphi, the voice said. Speaker of the prophecies of Phoebus Apollo, slayer of the mighty Python. The oracle regarded Percy and then Naruto in turn with its cold, dead eyes. Then she turned unmistakably toward Zoe Nightshade. Approach, seeker, and ask. Zoe swallowed. What must I do to help my goddess? The oracle's mouth opened, and green mist poured out. In the mist was the vague image of a mountain, and a girl standing at the barren peak. It was Artemis, but she was wrapped in chains, fettered to the rocks. She was kneeling, her hands raised as if to fend off an attacker, and it looked like she was in pain. The oracle spoke. 6 shall go west to the goddess in chains. 1 gains what was lost in the land without rain. The bane of Olympus shows the trail. Campers and hunters combined prevail. The Titan's curse must one withstand. And 1 shall perish by a parent's hand. Then, as they were watching, the mist swirled and retreated like a great green serpent into the mummy's mouth. The oracle sat down on a rock and became as still as she'd been in the attic, as if she might sit by this creek for 100 years. End. Okay, I finally got the next chapter of CCT out. Now I know we didn't see much of Bianca's bow past its creation, but trust me, you will. It will have its own special properties, as will Naruto's when he retrieves it. Now I plan on this eventually merging back in with the Naruto series. How that will happen will be a surprise, but Naruto will return to his world. The flashbacks, Naruto will have flashes of his past life, and he will gain his past techniques in time, but his memories will remain a mystery to him for a while. Let's see what else.
I would like to know your opinion on the whole creation of Bianca's bow scene, as well as the chapter in general, so yeah, review and stuff. XD, ZTC, ignore this chapter placeholder so that people can review the latest chapter. A bow by any other name, yay. A shiny chapter all fixed up by my miraculous beta Sakura for Eva, a big thanks to her for that. As to my reasons for the chapter's lateness, if you really must have the details, PM me. Suffice to say that things have hit a sour note in the house that Zuchi lives in. Honestly, it's been one thing after another, and I thank you all so much for being patient and sticking with me. At least I hope you have. This chapter is probably the shortest I have done for this story. I will try my best to get another chapter out soon, so enjoy this one. Chapter 4. A bow by any other name. Mother, Naruto whispered, voice harsh. His eyes trailed up towards the sky as a stray cloud moved to block his mother's comforting rays. All around him the hunters looked on as well until the last rays of the moon shone down in one silvery beam. Hunters. To me. Zoe called out. Bianca, Naruto began quietly, still staring at the spot the moon used to be. Come with me. With that, he marched out of the forest, Bianca at his heels. He heard Chiron call for a meeting, but he pressed on to his destination. He would be there, however the proceedings didn't really matter, as they wouldn't change what he planned to do. Naruto entered the cabin, locating a wrapped package on his chosen bunk. It was a simple bundle, tied with twine and wrapped in rough cloth. He smiled. His sisters always were fast workers. It seemed. Some of them got bored and decided to work on the commission he had asked for. A good thing too, as it would have never gotten done otherwise, considering the current circumstances. He picked it up and turned to Bianca, who was still confused about what plan her mentor had in mind. Here, he said, holding it out for her to take. I asked my sisters to have this made for you. It should serve you well on our trip. Bianca nodded as she untied the package. It fell open and her eyes lit up. She rushed to the other room and Naruto just chuckled as he reached for his own traveling pack. He checked its contents, then checked again, counting out every arrowhead, every drachma. A light cough interrupted his third inspection. He turned to find a radically different Bianca. She was wearing a long-sleeved sweater made from a light cloth, the fabric matching his own dull blue. Over that was a rough, leather vest that laced up on both sides. She wore a skirt that fell just past mid-thigh and laden with more rough leather, though what could be seen of it showed the same pale blue, hanging loosely around her. Waist was a thick belt in a light tan color with one large pouch on the back and a set of archer's gloves tucked into one side. On her feet, she wore a pair of leather boots that hugged her legs up to just below the knee. Finally, around her neck was a traveling cloak like Naruto's, the same sky blue coloring and silver moon clasp. It hung from her back loosely and billowed about just at mid-calf. She fidgeted slightly under his gaze, her hands coming together at her chest and a light flush dusted her cheeks. How'd I look? She asked nervously. I really like people like you. Naruto. Bianca asked her spacey teacher. Why, you look like a true hunter. Naruto said finally, his eyes silently searching for the source of the strange voice. Let's get to the big house, he said, after coming up with nothing else. We should inform them of my intention. At this, he stopped and looked Bianca in the eyes. Will you come with me to my mother's aid? Bianca gave it a second of thought before nodding. Even if we must disobey Chiron and go against the words of the oracle? I committed myself to being your student, did I not? I won't go back on my word. That's my ninja way. Naruto smiled at his student, ignoring the phantom voices that constantly plagued his mind. Sawada. Back at the big house, the council was held around a ping-pong table in the rec room. Dionysus waved his hand and supplied snacks. Cheese whiz, crackers, and several bottles of red wine. Then Chiron reminded him that wine was against his restrictions and most of the campers were underage. Mr. D sighed. With a snap of his fingers the wine turned to Diet Coke. Nobody drank that either. Mr. D and Chiron, in wheelchair form, sat at one end of the table. Zoe Nightshade took the other end.
Talia and Grover and Percy sat along the right, and the other head counselors Beckendorf, Selina, Beauregard, and the Stoll brothers sat on the left. The Aries kids were supposed to send a representative, too, but all of them had gotten broken limbs, accidentally, during Capture the Flag, courtesy of the hunters. They were resting up in the infirmary. Zoe started the meeting off on a positive note. This is pointless. Cheese whiz. Grover gasped. He began scooping up crackers and ping-pong balls and spraying them with topping. There is no time for talk, Zoe continued. Our goddess needs us. The hunters must leave immediately. And go where? Chiron asked. West. Zoe exclaimed, her tone exasperated. Thou hath heard the prophecy. 6 shall go west to the goddess in chains. We shall gather 6 hunters and go. You're missing something, as usual, Talia muttered. Campers and hunters combined prevail. We're supposed to do this together. No. The hunters do not need thy help. Talia grumbled. Nobody has said thy in, 300 years, Zoe. Get with the times. Zoe hesitated, like she was trying to form the word correctly in her mind first. Yer. We do not need yer help. Talia rolled her eyes. Forget it. I fear the prophecy says you do need our help, Chiron said. Campers and hunters must cooperate. Or do they? Mr. D mused, swirling his Diet Coke under his nose like it had a fine bouquet. One shall perish. That sounds rather nasty, doesn't it? What if you fail because you try to cooperate? Mr. D, Chiron sighed. With all due respect, whose side are you on? Dionysus raised his eyebrows. Sorry, my dear centaur. Just trying to be helpful. We're supposed to work together, Talia said stubbornly. I don't like it either, Zoe, but you know prophecies. You want to fight against one? If you intend to stick so closely to the prophecy, then you may have to work around me, came a familiar voice from the doorway. Everyone turned to see Naruto, his travel cloak resting on his back and hiding his pack, and Bianca at his side, similarly dressed. Her hair was in an elastic, much like Naruto's, but there was a comb stuck in it that was trimmed with bronze feathers. What do you mean by that? Chiron asked, a noticeable shine in his eye. Simple. My apprentice and I are leaving tonight in search of my mother, he told them. Ah, yes, but the prophecy, Mr. D began, states that 6 shall go west. It never said all at once. Regardless, prophecy or not, I will be leaving. Naruto stated, and there was no uncertainty in his voice, only determination. And I refuse to not be included in this quest, Zoe said adamantly. So do I, Talia agreed. She would do anything to make up the department she owed Naruto. And me, Percy added, receiving a look from Talia. Luke was involved in this somehow, and he needed to find out what was going on. Very well, Chiron sighed with reluctance. I do not believe I can dissuade you from your chosen paths. However, the prophecy does state campers and hunters combined prevail. As it is, there are 3 hunters and 2 campers, it is only fair that one more camper join the quest. Now do we have any? Me, came a voice from the door as it burst open, Annabeth rushing in. Chiron looked over the assembled group, Naruto, Talia, and Annabeth standing out among them. These 3, after being apart for so long, the centaur was no stranger to betrayal. In his long life, he had fallen prey to false friends once or twice before. These 3 needed this quest, this chance to put their doubts to rest, to either redeem their friend or end him. Then we are all set, Chiron stated, masking his somber thoughts with a smile. So, Naruto started, turning to address Zoe. We both head west, she nodded. I hope we find each other at the end of this road, sister, he whispered. If I don't, she replied, catching him in a short embrace. Bring death to those who dare capture the moon, little brother. I swear on my bow, he agreed, as she stepped away, and I on mine, to the same vow, she smiled. That's the promise of a lifetime. Naruto shook his head for what felt like the millionth time. The voice had gained definition and he had found it to be eerily similar to his own. It floated in and out of his mind, disappearing as quick as it came, like a question you forgot to ask that now sat just out of discernible memory. Walking out into the night air, he nodded to Bianca as they both drew their cloaks around them and headed for the border of camp. The cool freshness of night whipped at Naruto's face as he sent a cursory glance to the sky, noting distantly that the moon was still out of sight. His eyes shone with a grim determination as they crossed the border out of camp. "How are we going to make it where we need to go on foot?" Bianca asked, perturbed by the thought of traveling so far on foot. "I don't like mortal transportation," Naruto said with a shrug. "It's unreliable, dangerous, and the smell kills me." "So then," Bianca began. "Normally I would travel by foot to my destination, but time is of the essence, my dear student," Naruto said, his tone lecturing. "I understand that. I just meant, I know you would love to traverse the wilds at your teacher's side, Bianca, but please, rein in your lust for adventure," Naruto scolded with a smirk. "Now hold on a second. What makes you think I want any of that?" Bianca asked, by now getting thoroughly annoyed. "Nothing. I was just stalling," he replied cryptically. "Stalling for what?" "I don't care what you say, Whiskers, I'm coming with you, one way or another," called a female voice from behind Bianca. Naruto turned to take in the sight of Taliah, her hair a bit mussed with a small scowl set on her face. She was wearing her normal clothing with her tattered army jacket providing adequate warmth. "Okay," Naruto replied simply, before turning and reaching into his pack to retrieve a small bag. "I am too coming and you wait, you said okay?" Taliah said, her scowl transforming into a slightly confused frown. "Six shall go west. It's only right that the groups be even, isn't that what Chiron said?" Naruto laughed. "I should have expected this kind of thing from you," but she smirked nonetheless. "That you should," he agreed, opening the bag to reveal a small, silvery glow, emanating from within. "What's in there?" Bianca asked, curiously coming closer for a better look. "Inside this bag is the means to the first leg of our journey," Naruto said, reaching inside slowly. "In this bag can be found one of the greatest of celestial items." He withdrew a handful of its contents, his palm glowing a pale silvery blue. "Well, show us already," Taliah growled, finding herself increasingly curious as Bianca nodded feverishly beside her. Naruto smiled, slowly opening his hand. "Ladies, and assorted, nocturnal wildlife. I give you the amazing, the astounding, the celestial." "Tic-tacs," Taliah deadpanned, her expression obviously disappointed. Naruto eyed the small ovular deep blue pellets in his palm that shone with flecks of silver like so many stars against the night sky. "It's deer feed, actually," he muttered. "Looks like tic-tacs to me," Taliah replied, resolute. "Wanna try one?" Naruto asked, his smile mischievous. Taliah made a face before shaking her head in the negative. Bianca, on the other hand, was leveling the pellets a calculating stare, as if weighing the merits of trying deer feed. "So, what does it do?" she asked after reaching the same conclusion as Taliah. "Do not consume." "You know those special deer my mother has? The ones with the silver horns?" Naruto asked. "Yeah," Taliah said, quickly realizing where he was going with this. "Well, this is all they eat, and if we feed them, they may let us ride them." That said, he began to scatter the pellets in the general direction of the forest. "We're going to ride deer?" Bianca questioned, incredulous. "Well, they are kinda picky." Naruto laughed, as though enjoying some inside joke. "What do you mean?" Taliah asked, eyeing the tree line. "They only allow pure maidens to ride them," he said. "I am only able to because I am my mother's son." There was no sound as the stags, with their antlers a stark contrast to the surrounding foliage, bounded in, leaping gracefully over the short distance between them in less than a second. They landed with such silence and care that Taliah was sure she would have missed them, had she been facing in the wrong direction even. Taliah inspected them as they knelt and ate the pellets scattered about. They were normal deer overall, but colored with their silvery horns and strangely illuminated pelt. They were small compared to the winged horses back at camp, not taking up much space despite numbering 6 altogether. They had very thin legs, but she could see the muscles was tightly compacted, reminiscent of a swimmer. "Are you sure we can ride them?" Talia asked. "They're kinda small." One of the stags snorted before nudging Talia roughly with its nose. Talia frowned at the deer as it motioned for her to get on. "You shouldn't say things like that, they are very proud creatures and the proudest among them is Komitas," Naruto warned, gesturing to the one prodding her. "Comet?" Talia translated, receiving a grunt from the agitated stag. "Does that mean he can fly?" Comet snorted once more, stamping his hooves. "Comet hasn't flown in ages," Naruto told them. "He is very self-conscious about the loss of his flight, so he makes up for it with speed." Naruto patted the raging stag heartily on the back. "You're still the fastest among them, buddy, and between you and me, I think. Shoriftes could stand to lose some weight." The stag let out a cry between a neigh and a yowl, apparently finding the joke funny, as a few of the stags stomped their hooves. "Well, get on." Naruto smiled as he hefted himself onto the back of one of the stags, gripping the base of its horns. Bianca was already saddled up, wearing a bright smile as she held tight to her chosen mount. Talia looked around to find the other stags leaping away, only Comet remaining. They locked eyes, Comet letting out a snort as Talia huffed slightly. She hurriedly got a leg over him and was soon gripping the stag's antlers like the other two. "So where are we going exactly?" Bianca asked. "We only have the general direction of west to go on, as well as Zoe's dream." "I believe in my mother, she is strong and will persevere," Naruto said, frown marring his features. "We, however, stand little chance against an adversary that can capture a goddess. I need to retrieve my bow." "Have you gone mental, Whiskers?" Talia laughed. "You have your bow right there." Naruto smiled, fingering the small pendant at his waist. "This was a gift from Mother. I made a bow myself, just as Bianca did, years ago, however I was never able to draw my bow." "What? Why?" Bianca asked, confused. "For some reason or another, the string held like forged steel when I tried to use it," Naruto said. "Mother said that I would know when the time was right to take up my bow again, and that time is now. It is a stroke of sad luck that the location of my bow is to the west on the coast of California." Talia smirked. "That's about as far west as it gets, barring oversea travel." "It is a long road," Naruto agreed, but he smiled. "We should get moving, on calm." "No," Talia stated plainly, and even Comet stamped a hoof below her. "You're no fun." Naruto mock pouted before he sighed. "Anyway, try to distribute your weight evenly, leaning slightly forward so you don't put too much pressure on their heads." "Got ya." Talia nodded, trying to get into position before they got going. "Roger." Bianca smiled, practically giddy with anticipation. "Just one last piece of advice." Naruto started as the stags beneath crouched slightly in preparation. "Hold on tight." With a jerk that had them all reaffirming their grips on the stalks of their mounts' antlers, they were off. They flew through the forest, heading due west. Through the changing terrain, they seemed to never lose their stride. The stag's nimble legs always found purchase on the steepest of cliffsides, pushing on and showing no signs of fatigue. Comet led the pack with Talia, who wore a manic grin, thoroughly enjoying the thrill of the wilderness passing them by, faster and faster. After 4 continuous hours of travel, the stags stopped in a small clearing near the side of a river. The stags knelt by the water, drinking heartily. The 3 demigods dismounted and headed up from the bank before settling down on the grassy earth. "Where are we?" Talia asked as Bianca began to inspect her bow. "Somewhere in Virginia," Naruto said, glancing about. "Hard to tell exactly where, though this place seems familiar." "Yeah, I know what you mean. I feel like I have been here before," Talia said, trailing off near the end. A horrible shrieking filled the night air, followed by the sound of rushing water and stomping hooves. "Indus worms!" Naruto shouted, reaching for his bow as he watched one of the sea worms wrap its body around Comet and another burst forth to take a stag for itself. However, before he could notch his arrow, he saw another black feathered shaft flying towards them. It was aiming dead center between the two beasts. "Dierezi!" Bianca shouted. With that declaration, the arrow seemed to phase out of existence before two flashes of bronze flew out from its previous position. The worms were hit square in their heads, releasing their captives who trotted away from the water. "Split." Naruto smiled, his eyes approving. "It seems your arrows can break apart into the bronze feathers of the Stymphalian bird, and the hair of the nymph allows you to control its path." "The word just appeared in my mind," Bianca said, feeling a bit bewildered. Naruto chuckled as he lifted two small vials of fresh oils from the river bank. He walked over to Bianca and took her hand. Bianca's cheeks dusted the slightest tinge of pink as he placed the vials in her hands, looking at her with a bright smile. Talia tried to ignore the pang of jealousy she felt at the gesture. "I am very proud of you. Your fifth successful kill and trophy, and it was a double shot," Naruto laughed. "It was nothing. I didn't even know what I was doing at the time," she laughed nervously. "I will admit that it was a very lucky that you realized your bow's ability in time. You need to work on your skill under stress," Naruto told her. "Opsis, Loxos, and Hekergos," Bianca stated. "Aim, trajectory, and distancing. The three principles of archery. Never forget them even in the heat of battle." "I won't," Bianca said, determined. "Hold on to these. Gods are more inclined to hear your prayers if you offer something of value in return," he advised. "I know for a fact the Hermes uses the oil to clean and maintain those flying shoes of his, and my uncle uses it on his chariot." Bianca nodded, placing the two vials in her hip pouch. "Well, now that we've had our mandatory evening monster encounter," Talia said with a chuckle, "I think we should get some rest." Naruto nodded as he followed Talia to the cliff face where they found a familiar enclave. "I'll go find us something to eat," Naruto said. "Bianca, you cover the entrance, and Talia, get a fire going." "So what am I, a lighter?" Talia joked, snapping her fingers to generate a spark. "No, of course not," Naruto replied casually. "I've never used a lighter, but I am almost positive one wouldn't sass me." This earned a chuckle from Bianca, who was starting on her task, and a small growl from Talia, who proceeded to throw a rock at the blonde hunter. They woke the next morning with sounds of calling birds, and after a quick breakfast of leftover rabbit and wild berries, they were off once more on deer back. Riding hard, the stags made up for their lack of flight, bounding over streams and rivers, running nimbly through the densest of forests. By midday, they had made it to the southern tip of Missouri, where the stags had to stop to rest and allow their riders to stretch their legs. "So, once we get your bow, where are we going?" Talia asked. "San Francisco," Naruto said. "That's where Mother was headed. It's going to be dangerous, Whiskers," Talia warned. "Well then it's a good thing I have you there to protect me, de Lily?" Naruto punctuated this statement with a smile directed at Talia, the same smile he gave her that night, his face caked with dirt and blood. Her teeth clenched as she averted her gaze. She wouldn't fail him again. "What's so dangerous about San Francisco?" asked Bianca, and Talia sighed, thankful for the change of subject. "The mist is really thick there because the Mountain of Despair is so near," Naruto answered. "Titan magic, or what's left of it, still lingers. Monsters are attracted to that area like you wouldn't believe." "What's the Mountain of Despair?" "The site of the Titan Atlas punishment. It is the place from which he carries the very sky on his shoulders." Naruto sighed. "It is also the most likely location of my mother." Bianca would have mostly likely asked something else, if not for the whistle that pierced the relative silence of the clearing. In the distance, the three could make out a black dot that was quickly getting bigger. "What is that?" Talia asked. "It's moving far too fast," Bianca said, slightly anxious. With another high-pitched screech, the object came into focus, its wheels screaming and whirling at speeds unimaginable. "It's a train," Naruto said, sounding vaguely surprised. But something is weird about it. Indeed, something was. It looked as if someone had pressed fast forward on the train itself. It moved in a blur of color down the tracks, riding hard and fast, heading perfectly west. "You should probably catch that," came a voice from seemingly out of nowhere. "Fastest way west in all the country." Behind them, they saw a haggard-looking man huddled over a burning garbage can. "Uncle, stop that. The hobo named Fred act got old when I was 8, Naruto deadpanned. "You're no fun," he grumbled as his features went up in flame, revealing himself to be the great god Apollo. "But seriously, that train is your fastest ticket west and it will allow you to reunite with the other half of your group." "Whoever said I wanted to?" Naruto replied. "Hello, god of prophecy. Trust me on this, it'll get you where you need to go. Besides, you'll need each other where you're headed." Naruto sighed before looking out to the train. It had just passed them and was dead set on becoming nary but a speck in the distance. Even from here, he could smell it, the smoke, the oil, and a vast array of other unsavory scents the rig had accumulated. He watched as even at high speeds, each bounce and jerk of the cars could be seen. With a heavy sigh, he brought his fingers to his mouth and let out a shrill whistle. The stags came bounding in, stopping before each of their charges. Talia and Bianca mounted theirs, and as Naruto gathered his pack, Apollo seemed to just disappear. "So what's the plan, Whiskers?" Talia asked. Naruto mounted his stag and after adjusting his pack, settled himself comfortably on his mount. "We have a train to catch. End, waiting for the spark." This chapter beta ed by the great Sakura for Eva. Please let me know what you think of this latest chapter. Chapter 5. Waiting for the spark. Naruto winced as the sun's blinding rays attacked his eyes, and he shielded his face with his hand as he fought to regain his vision. After a few moments, the intensity died down and Naruto was able to take in his surroundings. He wanted to jump up in shock at the sight that greeted him. Where was the roof of the car he had taken refuge in from the revolting scent of burning coal? Where was the pounding of steel on steel that as the freight rumbled down its path? All around him were trees as he lay flat against what he could only assume was a post of some sort, due to the lack of shade. His body would not respond to his wishes anymore, as it lifted itself from the ground, dusting off the strange orange clothing it was wearing. Naruto was helpless, watching from behind his own eyes as his body took in the surroundings as if searching for something or someone. After a moment, he zeroed in on a small, human figure trudging up a forest path. His body took off in a dead sprint towards the figure, waving a hand above its head. Sakura-chan left his mouth unbidden. "What's going on? Is this a dream?" Naruto thought to himself. After a small jog, the figure came into view, revealing a young girl with pink hair cut short and held back with a blue cloth hairband. "Naruto," the pink-haired girl said, voice curious, "what are you doing here? Who is she? And how does she know my name?" "Well," he replied in a bashful tone, "I was up late training and kinda dozed off." "Idiot," the girl, Sakura, muttered, her voice taking on a bit of an edge. "I meant what are you doing out of the hospital?" "What do you mean?" he responded, hands up in a placating gesture. "I'm fine, never better." "Naruto, you were a mess after the fight with Gaara," she said indignantly. He looked to respond but her voice took on a somber tone. "You need your rest if you are going to make it to the funeral tomorrow." "Funeral?" Naruto asked timidly. A lot of people did actually," Sakura said softly. "Sakura? We wanted to tell you before, but you had already left." "We?" Naruto asked. Sakura clarified. "Kakashi-sensei, Sasuke-kun, and I." "Oh," he sighed out. "So. I never got to thank you for saving me from Gaara," Sakura said suddenly. "I would be dead if not for you." It was nothing, really, but he stopped short as the young girl embraced him. So lost was he in the joy of her act that he almost missed what she had mumbled into her jacket, as died. "What?" he asked. "The Sandaime has died," she said, her voice choked. He was killed by his former student, Orochimaru, the one who led the attack on the village. In an otherwise unthinkable act, Naruto pulled away from his teammate's embrace. The old man? He mumbled. Sadness like no other gripped his heart like a vice. His heart sunk lower in his chest, retreating at the pain it felt. A cold feeling overtook him as his eyes darted to the stone visage of the Sandaime Hokage. A large crack blemished his powerful gaze. Why does it hurt? Naruto thought. Until now, he had been acting only the spectator. Why do I want so badly to cry? Naruto's hands shook as he put them into a cross-like symbol, and in a poof of smoke, 4 more Narutos appeared, all immediately leaping off in separate directions. One, however, was grabbed by Sakura as she hugged herself to his chest again, hoping to calm the distraught boy. Naruto, you can't, please, came his desperate reply, strained as it was, and Sakura felt wetness on her head. She shifted slightly. Don't look, he said, voice heavy with tears. Just let me go, please. Sakura nodded sadly and turned away from her blonde-headed teammate, normally a bastion of happiness, yet now overtaken and shrouded with grief. Part of her wanted to go after him, and another part of her wanted to pretend she had never felt his tears fall like a soft rain on her hair. The world shifted then, and the last thing Naruto saw was a small whisk of smoke before he found himself overlooking a large city. It was nestled into a vast forest, and his view from above revealed that, despite the size of it, there was still so very much green within the city. The edges of his vision were watery, and for some reason, the sadness was lifted slightly from his heart. I wanted you to be there the day I took your hat, old man. He spoke out loud, his voice shaking. I promised myself that I wouldn't cry anymore. Tears won't bring you back, will they, old man? You died defending your village, and you always told me that was one of a Hokage's duties. To defend the village, no matter the consequences. He stood straight as the morning winds blew at his tear-streaked face. I won't cry for you anymore, old man. You died fighting for the village we both love, right? Naruto watched from behind his own eyes as the stranger clenched his fist resolutely before himself. A warmth overcame him, and he found himself no longer a spectator. He felt the wind against his face, he felt the warmth of the sun, and an alien force, a great power, surging through his veins. He opened his mouth, unsure what would come out, yet knowing something must be said. I'll take it on now, he felt his voice overlay with the stranger's resonating. The duty you left for us to protect this village, our home. I won't ever back down, I'll die fighting for it as you did, because that's my nindo. My ninja way. Naruto shouted as his eyes opened. He found himself standing atop the hood of the car he had slept in once they had boarded the train and reunited with Zoe's group. He shook his head as he gazed out at the rapidly moving countryside in the dim light of the morning. He was content to do just that, as well as agonize over his sanity, when he heard a voice speak up. Ninja? Said Talia, disbelieving. What is going on with you, Whiskers? How much did you hear? He asked. You were standing there for a while, then you suddenly made a fist and started yelling at nothing, she told him hesitantly. Are you okay? I'm fine, he said after a short silence. Naruto, she began. It's nothing, he snapped, before forcing himself to calm down. Just a strange dream. Talia sighed before moving to stand by him, placing a hand upon his shoulder. All the more reason for you to tell me, she chided. You know how it is for us demigods and dreams. Naruto tried to think of an objection, but relented. Maybe Talia could make sense of his strange dream. With a sigh, he began to recount his experience, from the sense of detachment from his body to the final moment of realignment. Talia looked pensive for a moment, then shrugged. I really can't see a connection between your dream and our quest. It seems to me that it's more like a regular dream, but even then, it's way too detailed. Normally, you would forget bits and pieces of it. I could feel it though, he said, his voice slightly wistful. It wasn't the phantom feelings of a dream, and it wasn't just from being out here. The wind was soft and gentle, the sun was warm on my face,
and the sadness I felt was real. Talia palmed her face. This is far too confusing. I mean, what are you doing? Naruto was holding his hands into a cross-like formation as he inspected them, nodding to himself. From the dream, I made copies of myself, and when I did, I remember feeling a small bit of the power I felt while standing on the cliff, he told her. So you think you can make copies of yourself? Talia asked. I'm not sure, he admitted, but there is something about this dream. Talia watched as Naruto closed his eyes, scrunching them up every now and again and grunting with unseen exertion. He was about to give up when he felt a small tingle of power. However, it was different from before. Whereas the power from the dream was fiery and pulsed like a heartbeat, this felt calm and comforting, like so many nights spent staring up at the stars. He heard Talia gasp and he opened his eyes, fully expecting to see another one of him standing at his side. However, he found himself looking up at Talia, who had leaned over with strange gleam in her eye. Hey, he asked. How did you get so big? I didn't, Talia said, voice holding plenty of amusement. It looks like you came into one of your mother's blessings. Naruto was going to ask what she meant when he felt her lift him into the air. The back end of his body hung and his tail swung freely from. I have a tail, he shouted. Yes, you do. That's not supposed to be there, I am aware of that. What are we gonna do? He asked. Take a picture. Naruto growled. What am I exactly? Talia examined him. He looked like a fox, however the coloration was off. The fur along his body was flecked with gray, while his legs were both jet black. His tail was tipped with white and his coal-black ears stood up on end. A fox, she replied finally, unsure as she was of the exact type. Why in the world did I turn into a fox? He asked, though it seemed to be a question asked more to himself than anything else. I had always wondered what special skills you received as a son of Artemis, Talia admitted. I have some control over lightning, and I am sure there are some other skills I have inherited that I just haven't found yet. The kids at camp all have special abilities that are in tune with their parents. It's only right you would get something as well. So I have always been able to do this? Naruto asked, incredulous, as he wiggled out of her grasp. He trotted his way down the length of the cargo train, his tail bouncing with every step. He tried to look inward and focus on his old body, and as he did so the power came back. He opened his eyes this time and watched as he grew back up to full height, wisps of silvery white smoke coming of him. This still doesn't answer the dream, he sighed to himself, or the voices. Voices? Talia growled. Talia, so you followed me all the way over here, huh? It's 4 yards away? I wanted a private moment. You're an idiot, she growled out again. Voices? You didn't say anything about voices before? It started the night of my mother's disappearance, he said. It's like someone whispering in my ear. What did they say? Talia asked, not at all liking the idea of voices being in her friend's head. Simple things, he replied vaguely. It seemed more like they were triggered by things other people said or did. Talia sighed. Naruto had been such a strange guy ever since she met him. It was one of the things she liked best about him. Never a dull moment and all that. This was different, however. It seemed like this was really bothering him. Forget about it for now, she relented at last, hesitant though she was. As long as it doesn't get in the way of things, you should just let it run its course. As time goes on, maybe you'll find out more, or maybe it will go away altogether. Naruto smiled. I guess that's the best I can do at this point. And now you can turn into cute fuzzy animals, Talia laughed. Cute. Talia stopped laughing when he spoke. Do my ears deceive me, or did Talia just call something cute? Fuzzy too. She smirked. And if you want to keep your tail or any other such appendages, you will shut up, now. There was a swirl of silvery smoke as Naruto changed to his previous form. You wouldn't hurt me, would you, Daylily? He whimpered, his bushy tail curled about his cowering form. Talia looked down at the fuzzy creature with intent to either kill or cuddle when the stalemate was broken by the intrusion of a familiar voice.
How did that get on the train? Percy asked, having just woken up and emerged from his car. Funny, I was going to ask the same thing, Naruto replied in. Laughed as Percy jumped back, understandably not having expected to hear the fox talking. Naruto? He asked hesitantly, recognizing the voice. I can understand why you would not recognize me, Naruto agreed. I have become considerably more furry. Percy looked on dumbfounded. You have a tail, I know. That's not supposed to be there, that's what I said. As far as we can guess, it's one of Naruto's demigod talents. Like your waterworks or my electricity, Taliah told him. Mother was known for taking the form of forest creatures from time to time, Naruto put in. Even more than that, she was known for turning other people into animals, mostly foolish men. A thoughtful expression overcame his foxy visage before he grinned a vulpine grin. Oh Percy. No, common. I've always wondered what Mom got out of turning men into jackalopes, he whined as he stalked forward, tail waving slightly. Percy backed away, running directly into the sleepy Annabeth. Percy? She questioned. What's wrong? Naruto was, at this. He looked back to find Naruto back in human form and chatting with Taliah. What was he doing? Annabeth asked with a small smile. Unbeknownst to Percy, she knew the games her surrogate brother played. He wanted to turn me into a jackalope, Percy finally answered. Annabeth smiled, holding her hands up to Percy's head and splaying them out to look like antlers. I like it. She smiled. Percy would have been angry had he not been so focused on her smile. He hadn't seen her smile like that since Taliah first left her tree. And for the finishing touch, Taliah laughed as she placed her hands into a set of bunny ears on his head. The resemblance is uncanny. Naruto nodded his approval. I may as well make you one. It would be a great improvement, I'm sure. Percy frowned, batting away their hands. I'd rather you not turn him into an antlered jackrabbit, Naruto, Annabeth admitted with a laugh. The blonde grinned. To be honest, I am not sure I can. Sawada, after another hour of travel, the train came to a stop in a small town nestled into the mountains. Welcome to Cloudcroft, New Mexico, Bianca read off the large, worn sign that hung above the walkway of the deserted train station. The roofs of the cabins and cars were heaped with snow and more dirty mounds lined the roads. The wind was harsh and cold, even to all those presently donning their respective cloaks or jackets. How do you normally get around? Percy asked, eyeing the cloak Naruto was wearing. Excuse me? Naruto asked, confused by the question. Well, the green-eyed boy began. I don't think it's really normal for cloaked figures to roam the streets of New Mexico. Bianca took a moment to inspect her teacher and found that his appearance was rather otherworldly. Then again, so was hers. I simply stay away from cities altogether, he replied. How? Percy asked. You have to have passed through some small towns or something. Naruto took on a thoughtful expression. How do you think that my mother gets around? Naruto asked. Huh? She, Naruto elaborated. As a goddess. Her hunters, immortal though they may be, are not. Percy sighed. I don't know. You still do not fully grasp the intricacies of the very world you live in. Naruto stated. In this world, there are many things that you may not understand, and many more that you will never be able to. Naruto walked forward, heading for the center of town. How an immortal goddess and her band of hunters enters Central Park unseen is one of them. Percy shrugged and began to button up the golden-brown duster he was wearing. That jacket, Naruto said, startling the boy as he suddenly appeared before him. The pelt of the Nemean lion? Yeah, Percy said, we ran into it at the Air and Space Museum. Zoe was the one who killed it, but she insee. Do not question her judgment, Naruto chided as he ran the cloth of the color between his fingers. If my sister believes you earned this pelt, then I am sure you did. Percy nodded, noting that this was the first time Naruto had spoken to him so evenly and with, dare he think it, a slight twinge of respect in his voice. Do not take this off unless you need to. It will protect you from all but the strongest of blows. With that, Naruto turned and proceeded to follow the others into town, Percy following behind him. Sawada. The group came to a stop in the center of town. They could basically see the entire town from that spot. A school, a bunch of tourist stores and cafes, some ski cabins, and a small grocery store. Great, Talia muttered, looking around. No bus station. No taxis. No rental cars. No way out. There's a coffee shop, Annabeth offered meekly, one hand over her stomach. Yes. Zoe agreed. Coffee is good. And muffins, Bianca put in with a hopeful smile. Okay. Talia sighed. You three get some food. Percy, Naruto, and I will check out the grocery store. Maybe they can give us directions. They agreed to meet in front of the store in 15 minutes and hopefully by then they'd be ready to leave town. From the clerk, they found out a few important things about Cloudcroft. There wasn't enough snow for skiing, the grocery store sold rubber rats for $1 each, and there was no easy way in or out unless you had a car. You could call for a taxi from Alamogordo, the clerk said doubtfully. That's down at the bottom of the mountains, but it would take at least an hour to get here, costs several $100s. The group gave up, opting to exit the establishment, but not before Percy purchased a rat from the glum store clerk. The trio found themselves seated on the porch of the old store, awaiting the rest of their group. Wonderful, Talia grumbled. I'm going to walk down the street. Maybe see if anyone in the other shops has a suggestion. But the clerk said. Percy began. Just drop it, Naruto interjected as he watched Talia stomp away. She won't listen anyway. I think she's angry with me, Percy stated. Why? We were talking last night, he said. About the quest, and about Luke. Luke, Naruto repeated, letting the name hang in the air. You knew him too, right? Yeah, Naruto said. Not as long as Talia or Annabeth, but long enough to make a friend of him. Yeah, he's a really easy guy to like. I thought he was my friend too. Luke still is my friend, Naruto told him, sighing. There was a time when we were like brothers. He has done some really bad things, Naruto. Percy began hoping to convince him. He isn't the person you used to know. You misunderstand me, Percy, Naruto said, his voice low. You misunderstand both Talia and me. What do you mean? The younger boy asked. I have heard of my wayward brother's exploits, Naruto replied. The deeds he has done, the wrongs he has committed. He gripped the railing of the porch tightly, his voice taking on a slight edge. But I can't give up on him until I see it for myself. I am sure that Talia feels the same. In the distance, they could see Zoe, Annabeth, and Bianca, all loaded down with pastry bags and drinks. Isn't what he has already done enough? Percy insisted. Naruto sighed. I want to believe that I can change his mind, that I can bring him back and we can be brothers again. He reached into his pouch, producing one of his tri-edged blades, and he gripped it tightly. But if I can't, I will end him and save Sasuke from himself. Save who? Percy asked, blinking. The blonde looked over to him with a shocked expression, unable to find an answer. Who is Sasuke? Percy reiterated. Naruto choked. I don't. Hey, Talia yelled, running up the street, spear in hand. I just saw some weird skeleton things coming up the road. This is bad, Percy muttered, eyes narrowing. We've got to move. They tore across the street, grabbing the rest of the group mid-run as they quickly put as much food as they could into their pockets and packs. They had reached the edge of town when they saw the first two. They were dressed in New Mexico State Police uniforms, their gray, transparent skin, a stark contrast against their black shirts and slacks. Their bones glowed faintly behind their skin and their yellow eyes shone menacingly. They drew their handguns and miscellaneous tools, taking aim as the demigods armed themselves. Percy produced his bronze sword, Riptide, from its pen form. Talia tapped her bracelet and her shield. Aegis sprang to life, its eyes meeting the stare of the skeletons defiantly. Naruto, Bianca, and Zoe produced their bows, notching an arrow each as Annabeth took up a position at Talia's flank, dagger drawn. Back up, Talia ordered lowly. As one entity, the group took a cautious step back, but stopped short as two more skeletons emerged from the surrounding foliage behind them. They were trapped. "We'll have to split our forces," Talia told them. "4 of them, 6 of us." They nodded, and in a flurry of motion, they engaged their targets. Percy launched himself at the nearest skeleton, narrowly deflecting its first shot as he proceeded to cleave its arms off. He then pivoted and slashed the creature in half at the waist. At that moment, the skeleton next to him opened fire, hitting him square in the back. "Percy!" Annabeth cried, deftly separating the skeleton's hand from its arm, causing the gun to clatter to the ground. He grunted and rose to his feet as a bit of distorted lead fell to the ground. Gotta love that Nemean lion pelt. Meanwhile, Talia had charged one of the other skeletons, their bullets bouncing harmlessly off her shield. With a grunt, she batted the skeleton's head from its body, but the beast kept coming. Independent of its head. On the other side of the battle, the archers of the group were frantically firing arrows, only to have them fly straight through the enemy's bodies. "This is getting us nowhere," Naruto grunted, as he watched the one that Percy had felled reform. "There must be some way to take them out fully." As if answering his prayer, one of the skeletons was struck by an arrow in the chest and burst into flame, leaving behind only a pile of ash and a police badge. "How?" Bianca asked, flabbergasted. "Did I do that?" "Lucky shot," Talia supplied. "Then let's try for another one," Naruto replied, tirelessly releasing arrows into the skeletal monsters, catching ribs and spines, attempting to slow them. "I don't think it will be that A is ah." Bianca's reply was cut off as she gave yelp. Naruto turned when he heard the yell and was greeted with Talia's hand reaching out to him. Taking hold of her, they both gazed down at the dark chasm that had opened seemingly out of nowhere to swallow their group. The skeletal figures were closing in on them, though seemed to be extremely wary of the hole. Naruto locked eyes with Talia as he returned his bow to charmed form. "No," she stated, looking him in the eye. "Forgive me," he said. "I have little choice." With that, he leapt towards her, wrapping her in his arms as he flipped himself below her. With an echoing scream, they plunged into the darkness. Sawada, Naruto could not say for sure how he recognized the very stench of death. Perhaps it was because he had nearly been claimed by it before, perhaps it was his many hunts at his mother's side. Whatever the reason, he could smell it now, as he groggily opened his eyes. He could smell and feel the stench of death clinging to him like a second skin. Naruto shook his head as he regained his bearings. Situated presently on the ground, he acknowledged the weight on his chest. As Talia, who was still out cold. From his position, he could see the solid obsidian walls and ceiling of a room. The room was dimly lit by a hearth in which he could just make out over Talia's black hair. To his left, he could see Percy propped up against a wall, his head slumped to the side as though asleep. Annabeth lay on her side to the younger boy's right. She didn't seem hurt, but one couldn't be too sure. Bianca was to his own right, sprawled over top of Zoe, who was still clutching her bow. Naruto pushed himself from the floor, ignoring the dizziness that set in as he set Talia gently to the side. Naruto was content to wait it out till the others woke, seeing no reason to wake them for such a place, and thus he did. The first to stir was Bianca, followed rather quickly by Percy, who seemed to have shifted in his sleep and was awakened by that unmistakable sensation of falling. "What happened?" Bianca asked, rubbing her sore head. "I'll tell you when the world stops spinning," Percy grunted, as he righted himself from his slumped position against the wall. "We fell," Naruto said plainly. "Very astute, son of Artemis," came a smooth voice from the darkness. Naruto was immediately on his guard, drawing one of his knives. Bianca stood by his side, notching an arrow. Percy brought Riptide to bear, though he couldn't help but feel something familiar about the presence within the room. "How foolish of you to bear arms against me," the stranger chided, his voice chilling their blood. "Brave, but foolish." As if by command, fire sprang up along the walls of the room, racing into the darkness and revealing parts of the room that had previously been hidden. A scant 10 yards from their position was a throne of miscellaneous bones, and human bones made up the gigantic seat. That fact, however, was not nearly as intimidating as the being seated in the throne. At least 10 feet tall, the immortal was an imposing figure, with his pale complexion and coal-black eyes. His ebony hair, straight as an arrow's shaft, flowed down to his shoulders, framing his face and giving it a shadowed look. He wore a crown of braided gold upon his head, and adorning his body were silk robes of the darkest onyx. If one looked carefully, then they would see that the robe would shift, and one could almost make out the faces of the many tormented souls sewn together to make it. "Lord Hades," Naruto spoke, offering a slight bow as he returned his blade to its pouch. "You must wonder why I have brought you here," the god spoke. The three of them nodded. "Truth be told," Hades began, his eyes shining as they bore into Naruto, "I care very little for your kind." "Demigods?" Naruto questioned. "No," Hades said, his voice full of twisted mirth, as if laughing at his own joke. "Demigods are some of the only entertainment that I have in my station. Every 100 years or so, one of them comes down here for one quest or another, and of course sending my many pets to hinder the heroic acts of my many nieces and nephews." Hades smiled. "I am rather fond of demigods, so long as they serve there," the god said, voice becoming more icy still. "I do not care for you, shinobi." Naruto began, only to grip his head from a searing pain. "Congratulations, you are now a proud shinobi of Konoha." When the pain subsided, he met the death god's gaze. "You know." "I know a great many things, child," Hades spoke evenly. "These visions," Naruto clarified. "You know where they come from, don't you?" "I do." Hades agreed. "You are a rare case, Naruto Namikaze. Born to a world not your own, living a life so unlike your original." "Are you saying I was reincarnated?" Naruto questioned. "No, that would be far too simple, not even worthy of mention." Hades laughed such a sinister laugh. "Then what?" "This information comes with a price." Naruto grit his teeth, looking back to his comrades who were looking on silently. From the corner of his eye, he met Talia's electric blue gaze with his own. Shaking his head, he turned back to the god before him. "What is it you want, Lord Hades?" Hades stood from his throne, and in a single stride, he was 4 feet from them and had adjusted to a normal, human size. "I want the return of my daughter," he spoke, eyes shining. Naruto looked shocked for a moment, before regaining his composure. "Who has taken her?" "You have." "Wah." "That damnable oath," Hades clarified. "Nullify her apprenticeship with you. I shall take Bianca and in return, restore your lost memories." There was a pregnant silence. No one said a word as the information sunk in. Bianca and Nico D'Angelo were the son and daughter of Hades. Zoe, who seemed to have awoken sometime earlier in the conversation, nodded as if this answered some sort of questions for her. "Father," Bianca whispered. Hades turned, meeting the girl's teary gaze. Naruto noted that, if for only a second, his gaze softened and his eyes that were like cold, dark steel, shifted to that of frigged ice. For a god of his type, such a thing was quite the sign of endearment. "Wait," Percy spoke. "Does that mean that Hades broke the oath as well?" "I did no such thing. I am not as foolish as my brothers," Hades interrupted with a damning glare. "Bianca and Nico were born many years ago and were hidden away for their own protection. If they were born before the oath, where could you have placed them that they would not age as they have?" Naruto questioned. "The lotus," Annabeth shouted, drawing attention to her now conscious form. "Of course," Percy agreed. "There were guys from before my grandparents were born in there. The Lotus Hotel kept their existence unknown, protected them from monsters, and allowed me to reveal them when I was ready," Hades said. "You left us?" Bianca asked, shaken. "It was not my intention," Hades spoke in a rare show of kindness. "Zeus had already tried to kill you once, having taken your mother away from me, and I did what I had to do." His eyes shifted to Talia, "But my brother still managed to keep her alive." It was you who sent those monsters after us, Talia said with rising anger. It was indeed, Hades said shamelessly. Your father had wronged me and I could not just take it lying down. So it was because of you that Naruto, Talia trailed off. Ah yes, young Naruto's valiant death. Hades chuckled. I had no quarrel with Artemis. I saved him from the cliffside and hid him away, then released him at the same time I had my children released from the lotus. You nearly killed him, Talia yelled. If I am not mistaken, it was you that did that, Talia Grace, Hades replied evenly. Talia stopped short, her voice caught in her throat as she struggled desperately for a response. Was it not you who rushed into battle so haphazardly? Hades questioned. Was it not you who was cornered by the Hydra? I didn't want it to happen that way, Talia said morosely. Cliffside night of Naruto's death. Talia cried out in pain as she was knocked onto her back. Her shield lay off to the side and her spear somewhere near the forest's edge. Above her, standing over a story tall, was the Hydra, 9 serpentine heads snapping and dripping with acidic saliva. Talia. She heard Luke yell in desperation. Naruto. Annabeth cried. Naruto? The beast before her gave a mighty lurch as it began to drag itself towards the cliff's edge. A rope pulled taut around its tail, dragging down to the rocks below. Naruto appeared at her side, helping her to her feet. Almost bit the big one. Daylily? He smiled. Naruto, Talia winced. I should have listened. I was stupid to think we could take a Hydra. It's okay. Naruto quieted her. What are friends for? Talia smiled, all too happy to have Naruto by her side, before she looked forward, only to see the horror-stricken faces of Luke and Annabeth. She felt a hard push against her back as she fell to the ground. Turning quickly, she found a sight that would haunt her dreams for the next month before her ceiling. Naruto stood still, that same smile on his face, an arm outstretched, the other along with the top left half of his chest in the mouth of the Hydra. He coughed blood, the sticky red substance spewing from his mouth as he regarded his friends one last time. Go, he whispered, and then like a whip, he was snatched over the cliffside. Talia fought her way to the edge against Luke's pleas for them to heed his words. Below, she could see the last remnants of the Hydra floating away to the sea, a cloud of golden dust. But no Naruto. And as she stared at the rocks and the foam and the crashing waves, Talia Grace did something she hadn't since she'd left home. She cried. It was a mistake, Daylily, Naruto told the shaking girl soothingly. I already forgave you. I'm here now and that's what matters. What of the deal, Naruto? Hades asked. Naruto looked up at the god, but he stayed in his position, hands on Talia's shoulders. That would be up to Bianca. Hades looked to his daughter who had remained silent up to this point, contemplating what to do. What about Nico? She asked. Hades shook his head. I will only take one of you. Nico will have to learn at the camp. What? Why? Bianca cried. To learn the ways of the underworld is very involved teaching. If I were to split my focus between two, it would take years, Hades replied simply. Bianca looked down. Then why me? She whispered. Then the unthinkable. The Lord of the Underworld sighed. You look so much like Maria, he said softly. Mother, that was Mother's name, wasn't it? Why can't I remember? A side effect of the lotus, but your memory should come back eventually. Bianca nodded, looking over to her teacher. She clenched her fists, vaguely surprised to find her right one still gripping her bow. Looking down at its sleek, ebony finish, her eyes lingered on the bronze feathers and she smiled. You sent the Stymphalian bird, didn't you? She asked. The god nodded. Bianca smiled. Then you have done enough for me. I have found my place. Nico, on the other hand, he needs you. I'm all he's ever had, or at least all he remembers having. He needs a father more than a sister. Hades looked pensive for a moment. He had never thought she would turn him down. The god inwardly sighed. It must have been her mother's undying influence in her. Maria was always a very family-oriented woman.
That was the reason why he had stayed around her for so long. She did everything in her power to ensure he was a part of their lives. She made so many sacrifices. It seemed it was his turn. He wanted to train his daughter who looked so much like his Maria, but he had a son that needed him and he would begrudgingly admit that she was in capable hands. At least to himself. Very well, Hades relented finally. He snapped his fingers and in walked a familiar, skeletal figure. This one wore what looked like tattered army fatigues and an old army cap. It walked forward, holding in its hands two items. They were two daggers in black sheaths, the handles 4 inches long and wrapped in black leather. Bianca pulled the blade and found it to be a deep black that matched her eyes. That is Stygian iron, Hades told her. It is indestructible, and unlike celestial bronze, it does not destroy monsters, it devours them. Monsters killed with these blades will never return. I will not be teaching you as I do your brother, but if you practice, you should be able to summon Stygian iron and therefore summon my soldiers to battle. Thank you, father, Bianca said softly, strapping the identical blades to her sides, one at each hip. Your quest has just begun, daughter, Hades spoke harshly. Do not thank me just yet. This excursion has cost you precious time, has it not? Bianca looked slightly taken back, then nodded. Harshness was just her father's way, after all, and there was no sense in taking offense from it. It would be best that we make haste. My lady's situation may grow graver by the minute, Zoe agreed. Hate to break it to you, but we are in the underworld. The nearest exit is LA, Percy offered. We don't have time for that. There must be another way. Naruto searched his mind desperately for an acceptable answer, but was coming up frustratingly blank. Guys, Talia asked, is it getting darker in here? The others looked around and found that, indeed, the room had returned to how it was before and the only light came from the small, center hearth. They looked to where they knew the throne was and all but Bianca shivered involuntarily. It was then that they knew that Hades, Lord of the Underworld, had eyes darker than darkness itself. The two orbs stared out at them, regarding them each in turn, before looking to Naruto. Keep her safe, or I will come for you, Hades stated, and to the rest. The darkness became complete as the hearth went out, as if it were a candle extinguished by an errant breath from a higher being. Oh, right. Try not to die. I don't think I could stand the sight of you for a while yet. Dead demigod jokes, always quite the hit at parties. The tinder had been set, now all that is needed is a spark to light the fire in his heart. End. One final note. I am very much aware that Sasuke is not at this point a problem to Naruto like Luke was. As he was killed trying to retrieve Tsunade, the Sasuke retrieval arc has yet to occur. The replacement of Luke's name with Sasuke's was just a bit of Naruto's memories coming to the surface as he viewed both boys as brothers to him. Sasuke's betrayal has not occurred, but the bond he shares with Luke brings Sasuke's name to his mind. What was lost baited by the fantastic Sakura forever, she really is my hero. Chapter 6. What was lost? Naruto grumbled to himself as he woke for the second time from a Hades-induced slumber. He stretched his back and rubbed his sore neck. Seems the Lord of the Underworld couldn't be bothered to arrange a soft place for them to awake. No, instead the sight that greeted the young hunter was that of a sprawling desert and worn highway littered with potholes. His companions began to stir, each of them moaning in discomfort and rubbing sore limbs. They had been deposited in the parking lot of an old, abandoned fast food joint. The doors and windows were boarded up. Not that that would keep anyone out, as the wood was weak and brittle from years of desert windstorms. Next to that building was an equally worn post office with a large white sign that read Gila Claw, Arizona. The sign itself looked to be standing on its last leg, and a few of the letters were sitting at odd angles. Behind, a cluster of buildings smaller than that of the smallest of towns was nestled. And beyond that was what one might guess was a small range of hills, but upon closer inspection seemed to be piles and piles of junk. Old cars, appliances, and just mounds of scrap metal piled atop each other for miles. Percy gave a low whistle. Whoa! Something tells me we aren't going to find a rental car here, Talia muttered morosely. At least we are farther west, Annabeth put in, trying to sound optimistic. Hades could have sent us anywhere really. The question now is, where do we go next? Bianca asked. West, of course, Zoe said. Naruto nodded with a frown. I don't like it, but it's the best plan we have. All we have to go on is this prophecy, traveling blindly west. The sun hung low in the sky and Naruto shook his head with a heavy sigh. We'll rest here for the night and in the morning, we'll just continue heading west, he said, fixing his gaze on the hulking piles of scrap in the distance. They wasted no time setting up a makeshift camp. Zoe produced sleeping bags and foam mattresses for 6 in no time. Naruto smiled at the slightly bewildered look on Percy's face. It's the same concept as my bow or your sword, he told the boy. It's smaller inside the pack than when it's taken out. Percy nodded. Pretty handy. By the time the bedding was situated, Percy and Annabeth had returned with firewood they had scavenged off the windows of the restaurant. Talia hit the pile with a quick bolt of lighting and soon they were about as cozy as 6 teams could be in the middle of a desert. It began to cool down quickly and they all retreated to their sleeping bags. The stars are out, Zoe said, aimed at no one in particular. Those who weren't already looking up drew their eyes to the sky in curiosity. Zoe was right. Without the creeping orange of the city lights, the stars shone in all their majesty. A million lights, some clustered, some standing alone, and through it all, wisps of silvery cloud seemed to intermingle. Amazing, Bianca gasped, voice alight with wonder. I've never actually seen the Milky Way. This is nothing, Zoe said. In the old days, there were more. Whole constellations have disappeared because of human light pollution. You talk as if you aren't human, Percy remarked. Funny you should say that when you aren't either, Naruto mused, one arm raised as though reaching out to grab the stars. What? You aren't entirely human, Percy, Naruto repeated. None of us are. We all have the blood of the celestial flowing through our veins. It is a blessing, and yet a huge responsibility. Yeah, Percy agreed with a sigh. Slaying monsters, taking quests to save the world, all in a day's work. Not just that, Naruto added. Imagine what you could do as the son of Poseidon. You could save entire ecosystems with a timely diversion of water or contain and remove a catastrophic oil spill. You could be a hero. An unsung hero, but a hero nonetheless to mankind as a whole. Percy was silent as he contemplated that statement. To be honest, he had not really thought much past the next summer, the next quest. It seemed like the world was being tossed into chaos and he always found himself in the center of it. He was focused more on surviving than planning for his future. Naruto was right, of course. With his powers, the possibilities were endless. It's not like villages needed defending from monsters in this day and age, so full-time hero was not a job choice. Maybe he could be a lifeguard or a swimming instructor? A professional swimmer, would that be fair at all? Sure. Waterboy here has a ton of choices with his abilities. Talia laughed. But me? Talia the electrician. Everyone laughed. I'm sure you'll find something to do with yourself, Daylily, Naruto smiled. I already know what your job is going to be, Naruto. At an all-inclusive petting zoo, Talia smirked. I would agree, Naruto said as silvery smoke surrounded his form, causing it to shift. But I don't really feel much like becoming a goat, growled Naruto, having let his form take on the likeness of a Bengal tiger. It weirds me out when you talk as an animal, Percy shivered. Technically speaking, he shouldn't be able to articulate words in that form, Annabeth stated. Yes, well, technically speaking, people don't turn into animals, Anna, Naruto said, now looking more himself. Annabeth chuckled. Duly noted. So Bianca, Talia began. How did you take out that skeleton soldier? I was wondering about that too, actually. I mean, nothing we did could stop them, Percy added. Maybe it was just a well-placed shot on Bianca's part, Zoe supplied. Naruto cupped his chin. Could be, but I think it has more to do with her bow itself, and her father. My Father? Bianca repeated. Was I the only one reaching for my bow when the skeletal warrior appeared with Bianca's daggers? Zoe shook her head, but the others looked sheepish. I don't have a bow, Whiskers, but I was sorta keeping myself from being the focus of the god that had already tried to kill me once before, Talia muttered, grunting her annoyance. So you're saying that Bianca is the only one who can kill them? Annabeth asked. If I remember correctly, her arrows struck one in the chest, Naruto replied, grinning. Instant kill. So if I hit them in the heart, they go down? Bianca asked with a smile. They were transparent. The foul beasts had not hearts. Zoe stated coldly. So it was by chance. They must have some weak point and they can't be minions of Hades since they are willing to attack his sire. They were made using dinosaur teeth, if that helps any, Percy stated. Naruto looked pensive for a moment. It just might, he said slowly. He got up from his sleeping bag and reached into his pouch, pulling out a small vial of yellow liquid and an acorn. What are you doing? Percy asked. Presenting my theory, Naruto stated. He poured small amount of the liquid onto the acorn before speaking. Demeter, great goddess of the harvest and the very earth's fertility, I ask that you breathe life into that which you so graciously gave. Birth. Naruto spoke fervently, putting as much fervor as he could into his words. Percy looked on perturbed until Annabeth whispered. Naruto explained to me once that the gods are more likely to answer your prayers if you throw in a bribe and some flattery. After a moment, there was a crack as the shell of the acorn broke and it began to bulge. Thick, dark bark began to take form and creep across the shell, and it grew until it reached 3 feet and then expanded, forming thick arms and legs, a large torso of wood, following a head that began to take shape. There were no eyes, just a small body of wood now standing there. This is a small one, Naruto said, but then again, I only have so much amphisbaena venom. Best not to waste it. Naruto took out one of his 3-pronged knives. This is basically how those things were summoned, I would say, though probably not with the express consent of the underworld. The little wooden man walked towards Naruto, who swiftly buried his blade in its forehead. The little guy stopped dead as roots took form, breaking straight through the concrete below and taking up a home in the soil beneath, still blessed by the goddess Hestia. If you strike the origin, in this case the acorn, it is defeated, Naruto explained, turning back to the group. So we just have to shoot it in the teeth, Bianca stated. No, Zoe began. That is the first time I hath seen anyone invoke the aid of Demeter, however it is plain to see that Naruto chose the location of the origin. Right, for all we know the tooth for each is located in a different place. Our best bet is to run rather than fight. Naruto frowned, his grip on his blade tightening. Be calm, child, Zoe said, placing a soothing hand on his shoulder. Naruto sighed heavily. Running is not something that sits well with me, sister, you know that. Naruto, Annabeth spoke up slowly. Sometimes fleeing is the best choice. You live to fight another day, Percy offered. I understand very well the wisdom in a tactical retreat, Naruto relented. However, in this case, we are simply running. If Mother wasn't in need, we could take the time to set a trap or ambush. But no, instead we must run scared from these beasts. He holstered his blade with a small growl. I am the hunter, not the prey. Surely there must be, Annabeth began, only to stop as a blazing light came from down the road. Seconds passed in silence as the headlights made their way toward them on the road. With a barely noticeable squeak, a pale white limousine came smoothly to a halt and sat purring on the side of the road in front of the group. The back door of the limo opened right next to a confused Percy, and before a word could be spoken, he found the point of a sword at his throat. As the owner of the aforementioned sword got out of the limo, Percy began to back up slowly, feeling the point begin to dig uncomfortably into his skin. Not so fast, now are you? There was a clang as the man swept his sword to the side, deflecting an arrow that was aimed for his arm. Standing there was a very imposing figure with crew-cut hair and a black leather jacket over a white muscle shirt. He was well built with the body of a classical
Warrior, all strong arms and a broad chest. He wore black jeans and combat boots, with a pair of wraparound black shades finishing off his look. You got a lot of guts firing upon the god of war, kid, Ares spoke, as he fully exited the vehicle. Naruto lowered his bow, before replacing the arrow, which he had just notched, back into his quiver. Until you made yourself known, I had no idea who was threatening our quest, uncle, Naruto stated coolly. Naruto, Artemis boy. Ares smirked. I thought you were dead. Rumors of my demise and so on, Naruto replied dismissively. What I want to know, dear uncle, is why you're here. Don't give me that cold civility your mother taught you. Ares chuckled. Truth is, you hate me almost as much as I hate the wet-head wonder here. Hey, Percy interjected. How could I hate you, uncle? Naruto replied. Some of my greatest hunts were of the beasts you set after me. Have you decided to finally forego the semantics and challenge me head-on? No matter how confident he was in his abilities, fighting a god was not a laughing matter, least of all the god of fighting. Ares had made a game of sending beasts after Naruto for the first few months after his initial separation from his mother. As Naruto stood exhausted over the bodies of the fallen creatures, the god would appear to berate him for his weakness. Naruto didn't understand if he was trying to force him to grow or was just toying with him. Normally I would shut that smart mouth of yours, however, Ares regained his smirk, despite his terse words. This is a friendly meeting. Obviously, Bianca scoffed. I was just scaring the kid a little, Ares stated. I'd never behead my enemies in front of a lady. What lady? Talia asked. Well, another person who just can't stay dead. He strode over to Talia, looking her over for a moment before speaking. Talia, daughter of Zeus, he mused. You're not hanging around with very good company these days. What's your business here, Ares? Talia asked. Who's in the car? Oh, I doubt she wants to see the rest of you. Particularly not her. Ares jutted his chin towards Zoe. Why don't you go get some tacos while you wait? It'll only take Percy a few minutes. Wait, came a melodious voice from within the car. I see a much juicier destiny unfolding here. Bring cute little Naruto in. I can play with Percy later. You heard the lady, Ares growled. You go eat, it'll only take Lemonhead a few minutes. The others looked ready to argue, but Naruto silenced them with a wave of his hand. Go. I can take care of myself, it will only take a moment. Ares stood by the door and motioned forward with his hand. Naruto ducked down as he entered the car. For years Naruto had been surrounded by young beautiful girls of varying age. However, he had never really been exposed to the anatomy of a full-grown woman. She was breathtaking to say the least. Her silver dress was quite modest in Naruto's opinion. However, she filled it out very well. Her curves were showcased without being too pronounced. What really drew his eyes was her own. They seemed to change and each shade was just as beautiful as the last. Her image would not seem to focus, and at some point he lost sight of what to describe her and couldn't come up with anything other than gorgeous. She smiled and he could have sworn she looked just like his mother. They locked eyes and suddenly, Talia's electric blue was all that made up his very world. For a moment, he was tangled in her hazel tresses, not unlike that of his apprentice, and even for a fleeting moment near the end, he was sure her hair was the slightest shade of pink, but dismissed it. Naruto. She spoke, her voice caressing the air. I am Aphrodite, a pleasure. Naruto shook his head lightly to lift the haze her presence induced. The pleasure is mine. He smiled. You are without a doubt the most beautiful of the relatives I have met or, I dare say, ever will. She giggled, her voice sounding like that of the many laughs shared with the hunters by the campfire. Quite the charmer, aren't you? Hold this, please. She spoke with authority and the confidence of one undoubtedly obeyed. She handed Naruto a mirror the size of a dinner plate and he held it for her as she dabbed at her lipstick. When you were first born to that prudish sister of mine, I was sure you were going to be quite dull, she confessed. Naruto was slightly affronted at the slight to his mother, but knew better than to call the goddess on it. With just him and her in the car,
and her boyfriend the god of war at the door, it would not do well to anger her. You proved me wrong, didn't you? She laughed. You are shaping up to be quite the interesting character. Now if I may ask, Naruto began. Why is it you wanted to see me? Aphrodite looked slightly bashful. Being the goddess of love, I enjoy following the romantic lives of young demigods. Mortal love is too boring. It lacks the drama that I crave. Her hands fell into her lap, her index fingers meeting as she locked eyes with him, pale lavender eyes. Every now and again, one as interesting as yours or Percy's comes along, and I just can't keep myself away. Naruto stopped short. Love life. He had never really given it much thought. Sure, he could admire the beauty of girls he had met. Annabeth was a very beautiful young girl, though he saw her as more of a sister than anything. A very young sister who should not be dating any sons of Poseidon. Then there was Bianca, his apprentice. She was young and quite inexperienced, but very eager to learn and very energetic, which was oddly familiar. She was very pretty, he decided. Her dark eyes were enchanting, deep and dark, and at times it felt as if she was looking right through him. Her hair, which she had taken to wearing in an over-the-shoulder braid, was a light brown that shone a dazzling amber in the sunlight. That combined with her olive skin made her quite the young beauty. Talia, however, was one he lingered on. She was his first encounter with a girl outside of his mother's hunters. She was impulsive, rude, and downright angry sometimes. Still, she was his closest and dearest friend. She was funny, she was exciting, and when it called for it, she was a very caring, pseudo-sister to Annabeth. When she smiled, her blue eyes would sparkle and dance like a joyous storm. Her ebony hair framed her face perfectly and he found her freckles to be adorable. Not that he'd ever tell her that. Oh, that look is just too cute. Aphrodite gushed. Which one are you thinking of? Your cute little apprentice, or the rough beauty of the daughter of Zeus? Wah! Naruto stammered. Or could it be that bubblegum pink cutie? She continued. Pink? Naruto questioned confused. That can't be, she was a dream. The goddess giggled into her hand. You can dream of love, but cannot love a dream, she said simply. The fact that she is a viable choice is just the reason I have taken interest in you. So that girl exists, Sakura. She's real, Naruto said. What about the others? These people I have never met. I see them like visions in my head. Aphrodite placed a hand on his shoulder and he was immediately calmed. When the time is right, everything will make sense to you. Though whether or not that is a good thing remains to be seen, she stated. What do you mean? You are a special case, and with the knowledge you will come to obtain, things will just become more complicated for you. Naruto sighed, palming his face with his hand. Things could never be simple. First he dies, then he's revived. A goddess forces him to confront his feelings for his close friends, and now he learns that the people from his dreams are real. If that were true, it would mean he had already met them, but how could that be? He lived his entire life in the wilds with his mother and sisters. They and his current companions were all the people he knew. Don't worry, Aphrodite cooed. Normally I would do my best to challenge a person's relationship in the hopes that only true love succeeds. In your case, I will make an exception. I will aid you, Naruto Namikaze, seeing as fate has already conspired to complicate things for you well enough. She took the mirror from him and held it facing him. For a moment nothing happened, then his reflection began to waver. It swirled until it became a silver pane and then a symbol began to carve itself into the mirror. Look for this symbol in my husband's territory. It is the key to your past and your future. The sooner you know the truth, the sooner you can sort out your feelings and make a choice. She giggled eagerly. Oh, I can't wait till you get past this awkward little phase. You have so much potential. There, staring him in the face, was a swirling pattern which, upon further inspection, resembled a leaf. Goodbye, Naruto Uzumaki. Aphrodite giggled and then the world began to fade away. Sawada, the next thing he knew, he was flat on the ground, staring up at the night sky as he slowly began to regain his bearings. We're in the junkyard. Percy informed him from somewhere nearby. Naruto grunted as he sat up, and indeed they were in the junkyard. All around them were heaps of scrap metal, and upon closer inspection, Naruto could see many oddities scattered amongst the scrap. Old swords, shields, and various other weapons, most of which looked to be broken beyond repair. There were old cars, metal legs from human statues, busted chariots, and all kinds of mortal appliances. There were even crowns and jewels scattered about. "What happened in that car, Whiskers?" Talia asked as she dusted off her clothing. "I had an audience with Aphrodite, the goddess of love," Naruto replied simply. "What hath the goddess asked of you?" Zoe questioned. Naruto ran a hand through his hair, his eyes briefly ghosting over Bianca and Talia in turn. "Nothing," he said finally, lying though he may be, but Aphrodite's words swam in his head, always coming back to that name. Naruto Uzumaki. "She warned me not to take anything from her husband's junkyard and that he is very possessive of these things. She also informed me of an object that I will need from this place, which means I will have to face whatever Hephaestus has in store for those who steal from this place." "You mean we," Bianca corrected indignantly, hand on her hip. "Your fights are my fights, teach." "While I don't really trust Aphrodite," Talia began, "if it comes down to it, you know I have your back, Whiskers." Annabeth flashed Naruto a smile, and Percy took that as a sign to offer a thumbs up, and Zoe nodded her agreement with the statement as well. She knew there must be more to his meeting with the goddess, but didn't want to pressure an answer out of him. The goddess was interested in one thing and one thing only, and it was for that very reason that she despised the hunters. She sought true love, but went out of her way to make life hard for most she took interest in. In her eyes, the bigger the obstacle to overcome, the truer the love shared. Many heroes had been led astray by the goddess' machinations. She would have to keep a close eye on Naruto. So, Percy interjected, "How do we get out of here?" "That way," Zoe said, pointing at particularly large mound of scrap. "That is west." "How can you tell?" Percy asked, genuinely interested. "I know this one," Bianca called. "Its Ursa Major is in the north, which means that must be west." "Oh, yeah, the bear thing." Zoe looked offended. "Show some respect. It was a fine bear. A worthy opponent." "You act like it was real." "Number less real than monsters only those sired by gods can see," Naruto offered with a shrug. Percy yielded. "I get it, suspension of belief is an important part of demigodhood." "So you do learn," Naruto stated. "Being able to admit when you are wrong is an important trait for a man to have." Percy was about to question the man part of that sentence, when Bianca gasped and shot off down a garbage hill. "Look," Bianca said, as she hoisted a gleaming silver bow. "It's a hunter's bow." "Looking is fine," Zoe stated, "but leave these artifacts where they are found amongst the scrap." "I don't like this place," Talia said, as she gripped the shaft of her spear. "You think we are going to be attacked by killer refrigerators?" Percy said in jest. "Zoe is right, Percy," Talia put in, fixing him with a hard look. "Things get thrown away here for a reason. Now come on, let's get across the yard." They continued on their way, traversing the endless hills and valleys of junk. If not for Ursa Major, they may have gotten lost, as there seemed to be no rhyme or reason to the content of each pile. Gold and rubies intermingled with old cans of soda and broken toys. Along the way, they found many interesting items, but none of them held the spiraling symbol that Naruto sought. Eventually, they saw the edge of the junkyard, a mile from their position. The lights of the highway stretched a long way across the desert. Between them and the highway, however. "What is that?" Bianca gasped. Ahead of them was a hill, much bigger and longer than the others. It was like a metal mesa, the length of a football field and as tall as its goalposts. At one end of the mesa was a row of 10 thick, metal columns, wedged tightly together. Annabeth frowned. "They look like toes." Bianca nodded. Really large toes." "Let's go around," Talia suggested. "Far around."
But the road is right there, Percy protested. It'd be quicker to climb over. Percy is right, Naruto conceded. However, the easy path is often not the wisest. Naruto began to scale the mesa. In this case, however, there is something here that I may need. You need large, fake toes? Percy questioned dubiously. No, Naruto said with a smirk. Look closely, there is something more. The group all turned their gaze back to the large toes. Sure enough, just below them was a small blotch of dark color, where the feet looked to be faded bronze. What was once dismissed as rust appeared to be a figure of some sort. After a few minutes of walking, they found themselves staring in shock at what lay before them. A boy, who looked to be just a bit younger than they, sprawled lifelessly against the bronze toes. He wore a large orange jacket with a wide white collar and blue shoulders. It was open fully, revealing a tattered, wire mesh shirt. He also wore orange pants and blue sandals on his bare feet. On his thigh was a blue pouch, very much like the one Naruto kept his blades in. What had shocked them all, though, was the familiar bright blonde hair, splaying in all directions and held up by a blue headband. That, and the gaping wound on his stomach that was caked with dried blood. Naruto reached a hand out to the body, hoping beyond hope that when he raised the dead boy's head, that it wasn't his own lifeless eyes he gazed into. With a shaking hand, he reached down and took the cadaver's chin. Slowly he lifted, and in one short moment, his world was turned upside down. A collective gasp went through the group as the boy's face came into view. 3 whisker-like marks sat upon each of his cheeks, and a line of blood trailed from his mouth to his chin. On his forehead, stitched into the headband, was a metal plate, and on that was the very symbol that Naruto had been searching for. In a daze, he reached out to take it, however he flinched when the supposedly dead boy opened his eyes. 2 piercing blue orbs. I will not be forgotten, Sawada. It happened very quickly. One moment he was looking into the boy's eyes, and the next he had received a sandal to the face. Dust kicked up as he slid across the mesa. Lifting his legs, he used his momentum to roll himself over to his feet. His companions rushed to his side, taking up positions and brandishing their weapons. Looking to where the boy once lay, he saw that the boy now stood atop one of the bronze toes. Who is this kid? Bianca asked. He launched Naruto over 10 feet with a single kick, Percy gasped, astonished. He looks almost exactly like him too. What's going on here? Annabeth questioned, her voice reaching hysteria. The boy in question was crouched low atop the bronze toes, glaring daggers at Naruto. Who are you? Naruto called, confusion clear in his tone. The boy growled, clenching his fist, before thrusting his hand out and pointing aggressively at Naruto. The question here is, who do you think you are? The boy yelled back. My name is Naruto Namikaze, and I don't think that. I know, Naruto replied, though his voice wavered slightly. Uzumaki Naruto, genin of Konohagakure no Sato. The boy yelled, thumbing his chest. I am the real deal, pretender. Pretender? We're 2 different people. No, you're pretending to be someone else. I am the real thing, and I'll prove it to you. With that, the boy leapt from the bronze toes and dashed towards Naruto. In response, he drew on his bow and took aim. Stop, he called. The boy paid him no heed, instead crossing his hands into a symbol that Naruto remembered from his dream. Kagebunshin no Jutsu. In a poof of smoke, 3 more blondes appeared, and in shock, Naruto released his arrow. It struck the chest of one of the clones, who gasped, then exploded into smoke. Naruto put away his bow, taking out 2 blades in reverse grips. He met the small group of blondes as a black-shafted arrow struck another of the clones. Hey, called one of the blondes as he ducked a slash. This is between the 2 of us. Naruto ducked to the side, lashing out at the passing boy, causing him to erupt into smoke. The fighting ceased for a moment as the other boy stared Naruto down. You keep denying what's right in front of your face. You're confused by how I look. Well, if you want answers, face me alone. Naruto,
Talia spoke. This has something to do with that dream, doesn't it? I hadn't made the connection until he used that technique. It looks just like what you told me. You should all step back a few yards, Naruto stated. What? I told you, your fights are my fights, Bianca protested. I can't let you take him on alone. For all we know, he is a one-man army, Talia yelled. Bianca, as your teacher, I am ordering you to stand down. Just like when you made your bow, some fights must be fought alone. Naruto said, eyes calm but serious and left no room for further argument. Bianca nodded a bit sadly and began to put some distance between herself and the fight. Daylily, Naruto said, please, I need to know. Talia shook her head. She didn't want to abandon him again, but if she stayed, he might not get the answers he needs. With a heavy sigh, she collapsed her spear and followed after Bianca. Kick his ass, she stated before she was out of earshot. Naruto nodded and sent a smile her way, before sharing a look with Zoe, who nodded in return, a soft smile on her face. She, like Bianca, had a hand on her bow, ready to enter the fray should things go wrong. Annabeth looked like she wanted to argue, but instead took a page from Zoe's book. A hand on her bronze dagger, she too stepped back. Percy followed, fingering the cap of Riptide as he watched the proceedings. Naruto was good, he knew that much, but he had never seen him in a full-out fight. To be honest, he was kind of excited. Okay, Naruto stated. It's just you and me now, so if I win, you'll tell me what these dreams are. The other boy smirked as he made a hand sign and 3 more clones popped into existence. It was never about winning or losing, it's about accepting the truth, he called out, as his clones charged. Naruto ducked under a punch, simultaneously taking the clone's legs out. He brought his blade up just in time to block a slash from one of the other clones. They locked blades and Naruto shifted his grip, locking the opposing blade between the prongs of his own and lifting the strike high and to the right. With his left hand, he stabbed into the clone's stomach, promptly causing it to erupt. Look out below, he heard the boy yell, as a pile of angry blondes fell upon him. For a moment there was only a cacophony of voices as the many blondes piled atop Naruto. Then there was a yell and many puffs of smoke as a lone figure broke away from the pile. With a mighty roar, the newly revealed Naruto, taking the form of a Bengal tiger, charged the one boy not in the pile. Whoa, neat trick, he said as he jumped back to avoid a slash. In midair, the boy reached behind him, releasing a volley of throwing stars with a flick of his wrist. Naruto shifted form and deftly blocked the projectiles with his blade. Why are we fighting then? Naruto said, addressing the boy's earlier statement. I'm not fighting, you are. You're not making any sense, Naruto said as he tossed one of his knives at the other boy, who blocked it with his own. The other boy growled, a frown on his face as he glared at Naruto. I am not a dream, I am part of you and Yumi. That's impossible, Naruto replied. It's not. Remember who I am, who you are. I am Naruto Namikaze, son of Artemis. Uzumaki. Uzumaki Naruto, that is my name and I am a child of the leaf. They charged again, blades put away as they threw punches. They ducked and dodged, but each took hits. They seemed evenly matched and after a time, began to mirror each other, blow for blow. Fist met fist and kicks were locked in the air. You're getting it now. Iruka-sensei taught us these moves during our 4th academy year. I don't remember any academy, Naruto rebutted. I was taught to fight by my sisters and my mother. I was alone. Sensei and the old man were the only ones that cared. I am not you. I hate liars. With one mighty punch, Naruto went flying and he impacted the ground hard. With a grunt, he righted himself and stood to face his opponent once more. Instead of an angry blonde, what he saw was a broken young boy. I don't know what happened, the boy said, his eyes hollow. Everyone, they were gone. Mother, she cared for us, and soon it didn't matter, at least not to you. Tears sprang to his eyes. I'm what's left of a life you want to deny existed. Everyone I ever cared for is gone.
And now you try to deny me even their memory, you want me to disappear. With a feral roar, a strange dark energy began to surge forth from the boy. His eyes, once a shining blue, burned red. I will not be forgotten, and I am very sorry for the lateness. A lot has happened, and on top of that I am getting ready for college. This is a bit on the short side, and I am not a fan of cliffhangers, but I hope it pleases. In regards to Naruto invoking the powers of various gods, I feel that all these years, with most of humanity no longer sending them prayers, the gods would be more likely to render aid to those that go through the proper channels. Once again I apologize for the lateness, and I will endeavor to hasten my update speed as much as possible.